Sure, talk to me. Well, that's a bit like asking, what'll I do when I'm driving 120 kilometres along on the autostrada or the auto, whatever you have here, autobahn, and I'm about to crash? Well, the answer is a bit late. So it's a bit late to do what to do. I mean, theoretically, it's a bit no, you do what you can, but it's a bit late. And that's our problem, because we only notice anger when it's bursting out the mouth. We only notice anger when the Vesuvius is exploding. So it's a bit like you're 120 kilometres along the road and suddenly you realise your wheels are falling off. Well, you would suggest it's a bit late to notice your wheels are falling off. If you've been going to a mechanic, you wouldn't have a problem. So the real learning from it is you do your best, damage control, but the learning is I'd better take care of my car. I'd better start noticing the problems before they get serious. And that's where meditation comes in, and that's where learning to see our mind at a conceptual level before it gets to the emotions. And that's what takes time. So that's the long-term answer. Because our trouble in our culture, this is how we think. We think of these things as emotions. That means, and this is a serious point, that means we think anger is an emotion because the body is involved. We only notice when the body's involved. We only notice we're depressed when the body is inert in bed. So in other words, we don't see all the conceptual stories that are deep in our bones, that are deeply there all the time, chatting away, day after year after year, and we only notice them when they come to the surface, and it's too late. It's not too late, but the big learning is I've got to start seeing my mind before it gets to the level of emotion. So that's why you start with trying to control the speech. At least control your speech. Then you've got space. You start to see your mind every day throughout the day while you're walking or on the toilet, while you're doing this, and then you learn the habit of hearing all the stories building up. And the aversion stories and the attachment stories, because they're all conceptual stories that inform the emotions. That you understand what I'm saying? That's the long-term job. That's the real answer. So meanwhile, damage control. Try not to do too much harm. Try not to kill the person. But the real learning is to start to see your mind and all the stories before it gets to the emotion. This is a really huge point. Buddha's a cognitive therapist, basically. You know, that all the emotions are just the tip of the iceberg. But our trouble is we only notice them when it gets to the level of emotion. That's why we have so much suffering. You get my point? This is a huge point, actually. Okay. What else? Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Attachment didn't get what it wanted. That's exactly the point. And that's what we realise these three poisons. Ignorance, which we get to now, the root delusion. The main voices in daily life are attachment. Attachment is this default mode that drives us to always get what we want all the time. And the second it doesn't meet the right object, aversion, irritation, upset, annoyed, angry, depressed. They're the variations of anger. That's exactly right. Always. That's how it is. So, okay, you could argue, you know, on the path, you can use aversion. So if you can develop aversion for your suffering, you can give it up. So it's intelligent. But the general, normal, uncontrolled attachment aversion are just these drives. And aversion is the response to thwarted attachment. Absolutely. When we see that, it's a revelation. Yes. From what? From what? From what? Different from what? No, it's exactly the same. No, it's not. It's exactly the same. That's my point here. You see, what we don't realise, we think the anger comes from having compassion. No, it comes from a misconception that the man is the blame and how dare he kick that poor innocent dog. Whereas you understand karma, you know the reason why the guy's kicking the dog, because they've got a karmic connection. And then you don't have anger towards the guy. So it's the same anger, but there's just a different object. I mean, you might see war somewhere and you get angry with the people who do the bombing. It's the same anger as your attachment. You see, that's exactly the point. Your attachment only wants the nice thing to happen. So the millisecond, there's actually, see, with the dog there's the extra thing of compassion. But the misconception of why the dog got kicked and who you're blaming, that's the anger there. It's the same anger as when you don't get what you want. Because your attachment at that moment only wants everything to be nice. So it's another way of saying it, but it's still thwarted attachment. Do you understand? It's very interesting. Yeah.
How do you approach the person who kicks the dog?
Well, that's why if you understand karma, if you understood that and that was your view that did interpret the situation, you'd still try and stop the man from kicking the dog. And you might even get mad at him, but it would be out of compassion for him. It's like compassion. It's like, what do they, in English we say tough love. If you're a child, and you've just told them 4 times not to do that thing, and they do it, no, you go to your room. If it's genuinely, if it's for their sake, and you're showing anger to stop them from doing the wrong thing, but it's based on compassion. But that takes time. You get my point? You don't just sit there, oh, well, it's karma, keep king, no way. It's compassion for both. But that's a big view. That really is a big view, but this is the logic of compassion in the Buddhist view. Do you understand? What else, people? Any points? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Of course. Yeah. Oh, of course it is. Well, of course, it has... I understand. Pretty much, it seems to me, we think it through, it's logical that karma is personal. It has to be. Because the person there has to be a relationship. I mean, you look at some people, and they don't move you. You look at other people, you attach them. You look at other people, you're angry with them. There can't be random. There's got to be karma between you. The way very much we see it, the way a person appears to us is very much based on how they've treated us in the past. In other words, in this life, if you've had a long history of anger with a certain person, you see them, it's really intense, isn't it? And it's not for no reason. Well, it's the same with past lives. It can't be a person who's never harmed you that you hate them. There's just no logic to that. Karma is very personal. In general, think about that. It's not random. It can't be random, It's an interesting point. I don't know how... It can be... it's way more nuanced than that, but in general, karma is personal. Oh, countless lifetimes, 1,000 lifetimes. It could be 1,000,000 lifetimes apart. Easily. It's very interesting. What else, people? Any questions? No, okay. Let's keep talking about compassion a bit. We got onto it. We began with it. We're talking about it already here. Just the view of compassion is a way bigger one, It's huge. It's not nearly the way we think it is, like poor people suffering, innocent victims, little doggy woggies and pussy wussies. Do you understand? We've got a very sentimental view of compassion. It's much bigger than that, But the key point, you can't have that level of compassion for others until you know your own suffering. You just can't. This is really the key. That's why the wisdom wing is the powerful basis, which is all the work you do on yourself. Understanding suffering and its causes. So looking at these three toxic emotions, these three poisons, as Buddha calls, which are the summary of the 84,000, the essence. The attachment aversion, they subsume to the subtlest one. Ignorance is the cause. It's known as the general name given to this root delusion, as they call it, is ignorance, marigpa, in Tibetan, unawareness. And it's this primordial misconception. So this is where the key thing to understand when you study Buddhist psychology in high school, you learn that the particular characteristic, as we're saying here, of all the neurotic states of mind, one of the characteristics is that they're disturbing. Well, that's evident. That's why we ask the question, what do I do when I'm angry? Because it's the emotion involved, because the body's involved and it's really stirred up and it's really intense. Well, as I said, that's the tip of the iceberg, but that indeed is one of the functions of the unhappy states of mind, and that's a fairly evident one. They're disturbing. You are disturbed. Now, the other one, which is the one that's harder to see, but which is the essence of Buddhist psychology, which we really, when we understand, really helps us understand why we suffer, is that these unhappy emotions are rooted in being misconceptions. They come in the mind from misconceptions deeper down. And that's that we only can get in touch with that by knowing our own mind really well. By learning Buddhist psychology and then applying that model to our own. Like using that as our map to identify what the hell is going on in here, So all these unhappy emotions are based on being misconceptions. So anger. So think about it. It's not that complicated. If you're angry, think about it. Think of anger. What is it saying? Well, anger's saying, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. That's what anger's saying. How dare that happen? You look at suffering, a war somewhere, or that dog being kicked. How dare he do that to that dog? The dog doesn't deserve it. That's the basis. That's what anger is. It's a view. It's a viewpoint. It's a conceptual story that's very habitual. And then when it's habitual, then it comes. That's what emotion is. Emotion is just the habit of thinking something that often that it explodes as feeling. And that's why we don't hear the story behind it. We just feel the feeling. That's what anger says. So that's a conception. It's a thought. Everything's a thought. Everything comes down to being thoughts. That's the fundamental in Buddhist psychology. So attachment is a thought as well. Attachment is a conception. Attachment is a thought that that object is delicious, that it has certain qualities, and that when I get it, I'll get happy. Aversion is a thought that describes the ugliness of a thing and it's the cause of my suffering. This is all implied in our mind. It's deeply intrinsic. It's deeply implicit because it's habitual. It's habitual. When you first learn music, the theory that I have to play C, D, F, it's theoretical. When you know it well, it's spontaneous. It's the same here. You know, we just know anger because it comes out naturally, so we feel the emotion of it. But you've got to go back and look underneath it and identify the thoughts that's there, and it's a misconception. So this is the key factor of all the unhappy emotions. They're all based on being misconceptions. Whereas love, compassion, they are also based on conceptions, but they're valid conceptions. Valid means they're in sync with reality. Misconception means it's not in sync with reality. This is Buddha's point. So, the root misconception, the subtlest, the most primordial, the one that is the source of all the others, that everything subsumes down to, is called ignorance, the deepest misconception of all. And that's this ignorance, mat-rigpa, unawareness. So it's not in, ignorance of what then? It's the obvious question. What is this ignorance? What is it of? Ignorance of what? Of finally, ultimately, how things actually exist. And this, of course, is a very subtle concept. I mean, we don't talk like this in normal life, you know. So already the attachment and anger and jealousy and the other branch delusions have the same characteristic of causing us not to see accurately what's there. So like I said, with attachment, this strong urge inside us that wants what I want. How you articulate that misconception is that cake that's out there on that plate appears more delicious than it really is back to me. It's a misconception. Anger, when I'm full of cake and looks disgusting to me now, that's aversion. Because the cake looks now disgusting to me, and we believe in both of those stories, but they're completely projected by my mind. Well, these both come from the root delusion, the root misconception, the root projection. And then what the Buddha is saying basically is, that this root misconception informs everything that we see and brings these branch delusions, but we've got to get to that root, and that's the one we have to finally uproot. So by working in high school on our mind every day, subduing the jealousy, subduing the anger, subduing the attachment, unpacking and unraveling these emotions, hearing the stories that inform them. And this is really sophisticated stuff. This is intense practice, I tell you. It doesn't happen overnight. And the only way to undo this is by using Buddhist model. It's a very specific model, a very distinct view of the mind. Then it's easier for us to hear how the root delusion functions. So what does it see? What does it say? This is where it's abstract for us. This ignorance really causes us to believe that the delicious cake exists there in the cake itself, having nothing to do with my mind. Whereas the Buddha is saying, in this ultimate level, this is the subtlest level of understanding emptiness, that it all comes from my mind, that there's nothing there. There's nothing there on the plate that comes from the cake, that ugly cake, delicious cake, beautiful cake, even cake. These are concepts made up by our mind that we project onto an object. And this sounds abstract to us. And that ultimately, finally, with analysis, and this is what takes years and years, we will see that there's nothing from the side of the cake, nothing from the side of the person that makes it that cake, that gives it that meaning, that we make it that. So when we hear, so in other words, the words, therefore the cake, the way to put it, the way they say it, therefore the cake, the beautiful, the delicious cake or whatever, is completely lacks an intrinsic characteristic of delicious cake. So when we come to so everything exists like that. So the one they talk about a lot, of course, is the object called I, the object called person. So conventionally there is a cake. Even though there's no cake from its own side, Conventionally, there is a cake, but it's merely labelled cake. That's how they say it. This is the subtlest understanding of emptiness. Conventionally, everything is labelled this or that by our mind, and ultimately, therefore, lacks any intrinsic, definite, solid, inherent, independent existence there. That's the ultimate way of understanding emptiness. There are different levels of understanding this dependent arising. Dependent arising is the shorthand for how things exist conventionally, and it leads us to understand ultimately how things exist. So understanding them and this is the context of the two truths. Tsongkhapa talks about Buddha's teaching on the two truths. So in order to understand, Buddha's saying that because of this ignorance, we get everything wrong. Everything appears wrongly to us, and this is what keeps us in samsara. So we have to cut that root delusion. Get insight into the reality that there is no independent this, independent that. So we have to understand independent of what. Well, Buddha teaches different levels of how things exist interdependently. The very first level is that things exist in dependence upon causes. Then we have the subtler level, which things exist in dependence upon their bits and pieces, their parts. And then finally, everything exists upon the mind calling it that. That's the subtlest meaning. So one of the analyses we have to do at a grosser level is in terms of understanding what the self is, the I. So first of all, conventionally, if we're going to discuss how we see a cake, we have to define conventionally what is a cake. You get the definition clear, then you can begin to discuss it. So if we want to understand the nature of self, we have to first establish conventionally what is the self. Well, the words self, I, person, they're all synonymous. And we are an example of one of those phenomena. We're not a cake, we're not a cup, we're not a toilet, we're a person. We treat ourselves like toilets sometimes. We're a person, so we fit the definition of a person. So then we have to analyze how how we understand the existence of the person, of this person here. And the Buddha says we get it completely wrong. So there's different levels of understanding this dependent arising. First of all, and that's why understanding karma is a really good way to help understand already how we are the product of causes. That I am the product of countless past causes. And you won't find any I among any one of those causes, So then we go to the subtle level, and we start to look at how we believe there is an I in here among these parts. But the Buddha is saying we can, that all phenomena, this is the second level of dependent arising, not the subtlest. That all phenomena that exist in dependence upon their bits and pieces, their parts. So, for example, the I, what are we made up of? We're made up of the body and we're made up of the mind. And then the body and the mind have got many, many bits and pieces. So there's thousands of bits and pieces in here that we know. If you put them all together, you get a person. Like there's many, many bits and pieces. If you put them all together, you get a building or a cup or an iPad. Bits and, things are made of parts. It's fairly clear. Actually, this view is one of the arguments that Buddha has with the previous Hindus, where they talked about there is an I that is their concept of a self is this partless, permanent, separate little phenomenon called an Atman. The Christians call it a soul. The Greeks call it an essence. That's a grosser understanding, but nevertheless it's a useful discussion to have with ourselves, a useful argument to apply. The subtlest one is that there's no I separate from the mind that calls it that. But let's do the second one. It's an interesting analysis to do. So one of the many logical arguments we need to use, they talk about how if you have let's go straight to the argument, straight to the discussion. If I say to you, I have a table and a cup and a lid. So when you hear those sounds coming out of my mouth, immediately, if you recognize the meaning of each of those words, you'll do an analysis. You'll check up, won't you, to hear what I just said, and you'll quickly then assess it, and you'll instantly recognize that what I just said was conventionally true. If I just said to you, I have an elephant over here, you'll feel sorry for me. Do you understand my point? So you'll immediately check, and you'll instantly check, and you'll realize it's true. I have a table, a cup, and a lid. you'll see that that's true. You'll verify it. Then we'll carry on the conversation. If I say there's an elephant, you'll walk away. So what we're getting at here is very simple. You basically proved that what I said was true conventionally, and that's perfectly reasonable. It's called communication. Speaking the truth. So if it is true, then look at that. How many phenomena would you have to point out? It's 4, isn't it? I, one phenomenon. 2, a table, a second phenomenon. Cup, a third. And a lid, 4 phenomena. So this is a very obvious argument, but this is a really crucial point, and you'll hear it. If that's a true statement, you would have to point out 4 phenomena that are separate from each other, wouldn't you? Conventionally speaking. Another way of putting that is you'd have to point out 4 phenomena that exist independently of each other, wouldn't you? And that means that you'd have to point out a lid that is independent from the cup insofar as to function as a lid, it doesn't... Well, no, lid's a mistake because it does need a cup to be a lid. So we'll change it. We'll say a biscuit. Okay? So if there is a biscuit and there is a cup, they've got to be... If you say, I have a biscuit and a cup, forget the 4, then you've got 3 phenomena, or 4, 3 or 4, whatever it is. So that means you've got to prove there's a biscuit that does exist, that doesn't depend upon the existence of a cup, a table, or a Robina for its existence, does it? That means it's independent. In a conventional sense, that a biscuit is independent of the cup, the table, and Robina. We agree with that, don't we? So you can point out conventionally there is a biscuit. We can point out the same for each of these phenomena. So you can say simply there are 4 phenomena that exist independently of each other insofar as they don't rely upon each other for their function. That's a very simple example. Now I'll give you another example. I have a nose, a hand, and a foot. Now, there's 4 there, right? I, you agree? I, nose, hand, foot. Do you agree with that? 4. So it's got to be exactly the same. And this is where we get really tricky, We've got to point out 4 separate phenomena. Now, the fact is we feel there are 4 separate phenomena. But let's check it out. Nose, hand, foot. So there's a foot, okay? That foot does exist independently of my nose insofar as for it to function, to walk, it doesn't need a nose, does it? Do you agree with that? And my hand to pick up a cup doesn't need a foot, does it? And doesn't need a nose, you agree? So each of them you can see. So that's 3. What's the 4th phenomenon I mentioned? What's the 4th? I. Right. Now we believe that there is a 4th phenomenon that does exist, that doesn't depend upon the nose, the hand, and the foot. We feel that instinctively. But you have to point it out. So where is it? Where is the I in here that doesn't depend upon nose, hand, foot, or knee, or pee-pee, or caca, or love, or hate, or anger, or all the other parts? Like my friend Pende says, we believe there is an I in here walking hand in hand with the other parts, as if it were a separate part. Now, this is the grossest example. This is like the soul idea, the self. There's we say there's body, mind, and soul. Buddha says nonsense. This is the grossest one. This is the grossest example. So in other words, so this is the point now. If there were another piece in here walking hand in hand with the nose, the hand, and the foot, when you insult my nose, you insult me and you say, your nose is so ugly, Robina, I will say, how dare you insult me? Won't I? But if the I, like the cup and the biscuit, when the biscuit breaks, the cup won't mind, will it? You get my point? Because they're independent, aren't they? It won't be affected. So if there really is an independent I, then the I would be watching and going, oh, poor nose, it just got insulted. But no, we say, I, don't you insult me. As if, so we sort of do know the nose and the I are connected, but we think there's a separate I there. Are you hearing me? This is an interesting one, This is a grosser example. But if they were separate, the I wouldn't mind. When the foot gets cut off, the hand is still fine. When the nose doesn't work, the foot works beautifully. So the I then, this is the subtlest one, it's finally you won't find a separate piece in here. You can't. And this is where they learn this for 40 years and then study and then meditate for another 40 for the penny to drop. Because we assume. So the other argument, which we think is, well, then, either we think there's an I that it's like the owner, the I that owns the hand. I have a hand, we say. Well, that's two words. That's two nouns. I have a hand, like I have a cup. I have a cup is fine. There is a cup and there is an I, conventionally, no problem. But I have a hand gets tricky. Because we feel instinctively, and how we act and how we respond is as if and that's how we talk all day. Who do you think runs the show in here? It's this I that we really believe is the boss, isn't it? That runs everything. That's how we think, but we don't analyze it. And this is the grossest example. So there's another way to do this analysis, sort of working backwards, to try and see how there can't be an I, and we don't need one anyway, Buddha says. It's an exaggeration. It's an embellishment. We made it up. We didn't make up I. We made up an independent I. There's a massive difference. So, okay, if I'm holding a cup, that's an action, isn't it? And we do it automatically because we've programmed ourselves to do this action, a simple action. But let's say I've forgotten how to do it. I've lost my memory, or I've become paralysed. I'm learning again how to do all these things. Well, you'd have an awful lot of work to do, wouldn't you, to train me to do this action. So let's analyse all the components that are involved in this simple action of Robina holding a cup in her right hand. You're going to have a long, long list of things, aren't you? So forget the cup part, but just of Robina, the parts that are playing a role, many parts of my body, isn't it, for a start? So you'd have to give a long list of all give me the instructions. Well, Robina, the thumb has to do this, and the index finger has to do that, and then the middle finger does this, and the muscle does that, and the ligaments do this, and this. There'd be an awful lot of pieces of my body to list in that list of each of the pieces that play their role in holding a cup. Are you with me here? That's logical, isn't it? Each piece does its own job, doesn't it? In other words, the index finger's not fighting with the thumb because it's got its own job. The thumb's got its job. The pinky's got its job. The wrist has its job. Each bit has its job. Do you agree with that? Like if you have a building, every single component of that building does its job. That nail does this bit, and that nail. They all work together, but they've each got their own independent job. Would you agree? And two nails there is not necessary, and an extra piece over there is not necessary. It's very precise. This is the type of analysis we have to do. So you analyse all the pieces of the body involved in this action. Now you've got to analyse the main player in this action is the mind, right? I mean, this is a dead body. Don't bother. Do you understand? So the parts of the mind, what's involved? I've got to have ear consciousness so I can hear your instructions. I've got to have eye consciousness so I can see. I've got to have tactile consciousness so I can feel it. I don't need smell, but I need eye and tactile and ear. And I don't need nose. I don't need smell. What's the fifth one? Taste. I don't need taste. No. I don't need taste, but I know three of those senses. But crucially, I need the mental consciousness. I have to have good memory. I have to be able to concentrate. I have to pay attention. All those mechanics of the mind. There's not much virtue involved in this. There's no non-virtue involved. There's going to be all the mindfulness, the good memory, the attention, the concentration, all those bits and pieces. They've all got to be in place. So that's many, many pieces of Robina all involved. Do we agree here? You see the analysis. So now listen, this is the question now. You can imagine, can't you, having a definitive list of all the bits and pieces of Robina that are involved in holding the cup. You can imagine this, can't you? You can imagine this? And you'd have to really cover everything, wouldn't you? Now, the question is this. What job is left over in this action of holding a cup in my right hand? What job is left over for this precious little piece that we think is there called I? Willingness, okay, good. Willingness is a part of the mind. We've covered that. The mind's covered. We're talking about a piece that isn't the body and isn't the mind. That's the point. So what job, and we believe it's there, called an I. We've never analysed it. We've never checked it for a second. We've never done this analysis in our whole life. We assume there's a piece in there that isn't the body, that isn't the mind, that's the owner, and it's the boss. That's how we all think. Like the willingness, or the one who watches it, and kind of like the boss who oversees it. But what piece is that? What is its job? But the point is, what is its job? What job is left over after I've covered all those bits? What job is left over? You see the point? Can you hear the question? Well, I want some suggestions, please. What job is left? Because we believe it's there. What job is it doing? Marius, what job is it doing? What's your name? Not Marius, you're Marcus. What job is it doing? What? That's the mind, dear. We've covered the mind. That's done. It isn't body and it isn't mind. Remember that. It is not the body and is not the mind. We've just covered the body and mind. What piece is left? That's what we believe the creator is. If it's the universe, we need the creator needs, we believe the universe needs a creator, a boss. Well, the self is like the inner creator. That's the same philosophical view of a creator. Well, the Buddha says it's an unnecessary embellishment that we don't need a creator, and the world doesn't need, because the sentient beings do fine creating their own suffering and happiness, and we don't need an I. The bits and pieces work fine together. They don't need a boss. It's a way of saying it, you know. What? What, darling?
I am the mind, I am the feeling.
Oh, good, okay, that's another argument. No, that's nonsense. Because, listen, if I am everything, No, I know, I'm about to debate with you. So the two main faults we have: either we think there's an I that runs the show and runs everything, like the boss, you know, or all of me is I. Well, if that's the case, why would I say I have a hand? If I am my hand, why would I say have a hand? It's like saying I have an eye. And then if you have a hand and then a mind, you have as many pieces as you have as many eyes you have. That's clearly bizarre. And the other argument there is that the base. This is the subtlest one. The base, which is the hand, the pieces here. The base is the 5 fingers. The label we give it is hand. So hand is not the base. It can't be. So the pieces of all here, all the bits and pieces of body and mind, are the basis for the label I. But they can't be the I. If they're the I, then the pieces and the I, there's no separation. Yeah. What's that mean? What's energy, darling? You've got to give me a definition. What's energy, please?
I would say that movement and changing what's.
No, darling, we've got to find we're looking for one specific thing that bears the label I. That's far too vague and general. We're looking for a thing. That's what we think the I is. We believe it's in there. That's the point. We believe there's an I. I mean, every day we say, I this and I that, and you did this to me, and I said this and I did this. It was this real word for us. It's a central player in our universe. So another way to say it is this. We say a word. Like I said before, if we say a word, it has to have a referent object. Wait, please wait. If we say a word, it's got to have a referent object. So we say cup. If we say, I have a cup, that's valid. Because they're independent. There's a piece called Robina here is a name given for this piece, and cup's a name for this piece. So we can say Robina's holding a cup. That's a valid conventional statement, and you can point out the cup and you can point out Robina. There's 2 separate phenomena, simply speaking. But when you get look at this one, it's easy. My cup has a base. Look at that. It's true. Conventionally, it's true, but analyze it. You cannot find 2 separate phenomena. Take away the base, you don't have a cup. It's not possible. So conventionally, without analysis, it's correct to say Robina has a nose. It's a way of talking. But we embellish it, and we think there is an I that's separate from the nose. That's the exaggeration. We think there's a cup and a base that are separate from each other, but you won't find them. You can't, because a cup doesn't exist without a base. You can't find a Robina without a nose or a hand or a love or hate. Because this is the final point, because cup is the name we give to all the bits and pieces. So the subtlest meaning is the merely labelled one. The subtlest meaning is you won't find anything there that doesn't come from, that is not merely labelled cup. There's Robina here, merely labelled. This is the hardest one. This is the subtlest one to get to. But in a sense, it's easier too. And this is the argument. You know, this is the logic of it. Okay, that everything comes from the mind. That, you know, that from the first time, I'm just editing a book of Lama Zopa's right now, the letters he writes to prisoners, into a book, and he's got one chapter on this one, of merely labelled, and he uses as a typical example, a great example, he uses the example of the alphabet. When you first went to school, and then the teacher wrote down the alphabet on the blackboard, or it depends on your generation, maybe it was a whiteboard, you know. And so, you know, so the first thing you do is you see these 3 lines, isn't it? There's a line that way, a line this way, and there's a line across. What you see is a design on the board. That's what you see, is 3 lines. Only when she tells you that is A, do you then see A. So A is made up by the mind. And the Buddha is saying everything in the universe is like that. So there is a basis. The basis of the label A is those three lines configured in that way. So as soon as we see those three lines and we're taught it's A, we forget that we were taught it's A, and then what happens is we think we see A. We don't. We see three lines. We think we see I, but what we see is the body and the mind, and then we label it I. And then we forget that we've labelled it, and then we think it's real. And this is what we do with the entire universe. The same with beauty, ugliness, everything, you know. He's talking in the letter, it's a letter to a man in the prison who wrote about his sexual attachment. He said, you know, it's like there's a body there, and because of past habit, you're attached to the opposite sex. As he says, it could be, like, you know, if you're a gay or a lesbian, it's all the same principle. There's a body there with a certain shape. So you're a boy in this life, as he said, with a penis, and you see a girl with breasts. So that's there's the object out there. And because of your attachment to that shape, you then think there's beauty there. But the beauty is not in the object. The beauty is obvious. It comes from the mind. He gave all these different logical examples to prove it's true. We know this. We sort of know this. I mean, the cake is a really good example. When you're hungry, and you see the chocolate cake on the plate, the shape, and you label it chocolate cake, and then you label it delicious chocolate cake, and all the other dramas that attachment does, which then says, when I get it, I'll get happy, and all the other. But as soon as you've eaten 4 pieces, the cake is not even cold yet. You know, the big cake's still there, a few pieces missing out of the circle. You've eaten 4 of them, and now you look at the rest of the cake, and now it looks disgusting to you. 5 minutes ago, it looked delicious. It's so obvious it comes from our mind, but we don't learn this. You know, it's so amazing. It's so obvious that there's no intrinsic. It's so clear that if it were really intrinsically delicious, no matter how many pieces you had, it would still look delicious. But it's really obvious it's not. This is proving this emptiness. It's not that complicated, you know. I mean, it is, but it's not. And Buddha says, for eons we've been practicing, making up stories, and we've made up the universe. In this sense, really, we literally make up the universe. We make up new things every day, and then we believe in them. So the first process is you see the base, the shape. Then you see, and then the mind calls it A. And then this is the next point. Then you believe in it. So that's a valid statement. That's valid, but we see it as intrinsically existing in that shape. We see the shape. We call it chocolate cake. We call it delicious chocolate cake. And then the next step is we believe it's delicious. So that's why the really profound practice every day: see the cake, relatively speaking, but don't believe in what you're seeing. This is a powerful way to practice every day. Don't believe it exists in the cake. Don't believe that A exists in those 3 lines. We impute that meaning. But then that's where ultimately, conventional, so ultimately, there is no A from its own side coming from the shape, but there is still an A on that blackboard. It functions as an A, and you put it together with other words and it makes a word. And this is where the conventional and the ultimate put together is necessary to do. Because what we hear when we hear there's no A on the blackboard, we become nihilistic and say there's no A. Oh, there's no I here, there's no I, and we want to kill ourselves, you know. That's nihilism, and that's the big mistake. As Tsongkhapa says, it's so important to hear emptiness in the context of the 2 truths, conventional reality and ultimate. Then you never fall into the abyss of the great mistake, he said, you know. Because we can't help, but when we hear there's nothing from the side of these parts that is an I, we naturally think, oh, well, there's no I. Well, that you just chucked the baby out with the bathwater. So it's so important to understand in the context of dependent arising, of conventional. So there is no I from its own side, but there is an I that does exist, labelled by the mind. And this is the 2 things we have to put together. Then we never lose the plot, that we never become nihilistic, you know. This is the essence of it. So, okay, let me just take a different tack now. That's the general way, just a general idea of how things exist and how ignorance in our mind doesn't understand that. That's the root delusion. It doesn't understand this. So we keep clinging to everything as having an intrinsic nature. So where does this word emptiness fit in? Because we get very confused with that word. Well, emptiness is just a shorthand for the wisdom in the mind that gets to realize that there is no intrinsic cup there, chocolate cake, A, I, or anything else. There's not coming from there. So what we have to realize is the absence of that intrinsic I here. We have to realize the lack of the intrinsic A there. So another so shorthand for that is emptiness of intrinsic A, emptiness of independent A, emptiness of delicious cake, emptiness of intrinsic me. So the word emptiness. So it's a simple word. It just means not. So, if you say, we might go, oh, my cup's empty, wouldn't we? Isn't it? So this is a whole important point. If you go into the crockery section of your shopping centre, what do they call it? When do you go to your shopping? What do you call a shop where you buy your crockery? What's it called? What do you call them? What? Crockery, cups and plates, dishes. Anyway, whatever the shop is, you don't go to the shop and you don't look at all the cups and go, oh my God, they're empty. Why wouldn't you say that? Why wouldn't you say it's empty? The cups are empty. There's no tea in the cups, is there? Why wouldn't you say, oh my gosh, the cup's empty? Of tea. Why wouldn't you say that? That's right. In other words, you don't expect tea to be in a cup. You don't expect there to be tea in the cup in the crockery shop. It's clear, isn't it? So the only reason I'd say, oh my God, my cup's empty, I get a shock. Why? Because I expected tea. This is a really important point now. Okay, so we use the ordinary word empty of tea. That's pretty simple. Look in your bank, you think there are some francs there. You go, oh my God, my bank account's empty. Well, we know it means of francs, right? Because you expected francs. If you know already there's 0 francs, you don't get surprised if you don't say my bank account's empty because you know already there's no francs there. So the only reason we say, oh my God, my bank account's empty, or my cup's empty of tea is because you expected it. This is a really important point. You with me? It's logical, isn't it? Okay, good. Now, so I'm trying to first use the word empty in the very simple sense of the meaning there's not something there that you expected to be there. That's the point. You look in the room, you're looking for Mary. Oh no, the room's empty. You mean there's no people in it? We'd say that. The only reason you'd say that is if you're expecting Mary to be there. So, okay, now, like we said before, the way the mind functions, its job is to cognize. So what is its job? To cognize something. So whatever the mind cognizes, you can say it like this. They call it a phenomenon or an object or an existent. But I like to say it this way, that the mind always cognizes nouns sort of thing. So think of this. If I see my cup and there's tea in there, then the object that exists in my cup is called tea, isn't it? But if there is no tea there, turn that around into a phenomenon, and you'd call it the absence of tea. Can you hear that? It's a negating phrase. But it's a very valid statement. I'm cognizing the absence of tea in my cup. We don't talk that way, but can you hear the point? The mind cognizes like that. It always cognizes something. It cognizes something. So if you see tea in your cup, your mind just cognized the phenomenon called tea. You agree with that? In your cup. But if there's no tea there, we'd say, oh, there's no tea in my cup. Another way of putting it is as a noun, if you like, you just cognized the phenomenon called the absence of tea. Can you hear that point? And it's not just being clever. This is how the mind works. So that's called, another word for absence is emptiness. Don't hear it as like cosmic Buddhist emptiness. Emptiness simply means the absence of something. You understand what I'm saying? The ordinary meaning of the word is the absence of something. So what your mind just cognized correctly is the absence of tea in your cup. If you look in your bank, what you just cognized was the absence of francs in your bank. You with me? So the absence of something is a very vivid, real thing. Let's say you've been convinced you've got cancer. And you go to the doctor and they say you've no longer got cancer. That's a very amazing realization to have. You just discovered the absence of cancer. That's a very nice emptiness to discover, isn't it? Do you understand what I'm saying? So you discovered, I don't have cancer. The mind just cognized the absence of cancer. That's the way they use the concept, the absence of something. And it's got very powerful meaning. Okay, so what's the concept? What's the Buddha's point? He is saying that this ego grasping, this maripa, this ignorance, has been since beginningless time believing in a real intrinsic independent I. Speak just simply, okay? We believe it's there. Everything we say is on the basis of that belief. Everything we feel is on the basis of that belief. And all he's telling us is that particular I, an independent I, has never, doesn't and could never exist. So tea could exist. Money could exist. Do you understand? People could exist. They're simple examples of absences. But this is a very dramatic, radical absence. So when you realize emptiness at the subtlest level of your mind in deepest meditation on the basis of calm abiding, you can't do it conceptually. We understand it conceptually, but the realization of it has to be in single point of concentration, like Lama said. The first time you see nakedly at a subtle level that there never has been, isn't, and never could be that particular independent I. It's an impossibility. That's when you realize the emptiness of independent I. And that's the first second that you're climbing out of samsara into nirvana, and you can't fall back from there. You can only go forward because you've cut the root. You've got more work to do, but that's the first time you realize it beyond conceptual. It's beyond conceptual. It's at the subtle level of your mind. And you realize that absence. You see that, this incredible realization that there hasn't been, isn't, and never could be that I you've believed in since beginningless time. Are we communicating here? Just the use of the words, Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's like asking about apples and oranges. It's not the same. There's no relationship between those two concepts, but never mind, I'll try and answer. A robot's a machine. So the implication of your saying if there's no permanent I, you're saying there's no mind. We're not discussing the mind. Mind is what the difference between you and a robot. So let's just get the words clear. A robot is a machine, right? So you got flesh, you got the five elements. You're made up of the four. Sorry, you got earth, you got the matter, the body, but you've got a mind as well. So mind and body are the parts for the. What's your name? I forgot. Tony. So Tony is the name of the phenomenon called a person. Do you agree you're a person? Okay. So Tony is the name for a person. A person is made up of what? Body and mind. So a person has a body and a person has a mind. A robot has the physical elements, the same as your four, only has the elements. It doesn't have a mind, so therefore it's not a person. So then that's not your question. Your question is, then what? That's not your question then. So what's your question then? Because we proved a robot's not a person. Yeah. No, not for the Buddha. Not for the Buddha. Not for the Buddha. That's all. I'm going to tell you Buddha's view. It's not for the Buddha. Not for the Buddha, darling. Absolutely not for the Buddha. Oh, no. Well, they could call it that, and I get your point. But then that does your mind does reincarnate. Absolutely. No, not physical. Not the. I'm not trying to be semantic here. The Buddha's view is, as we've been saying, that consciousness is not physical. You can call it a subtle. I mean, they even use the term in Buddhism too, that they've got the Dharmakaya, which is the truth body, but it's not technically a body. This is referring to consciousness. So consciousness is not physical. A person's made up of consciousness, which is not physical, and the four elements, and they're conjoined together. So what continues from life to life is your very subtle consciousness carrying all the karmic imprints of your actions. That's what continues moment by moment. But that's not contradicted by the fact that consciousness doesn't have an intrinsic nature. So the real point is to hear what it means to be empty of intrinsic nature. It doesn't contradict the existence of a mind or a body. So just getting our head around those ideas. All right, Tony? Will that do for now? Of course. That's right. Go on. Things. The world, yes. That's right.
But then, what is this that identifies with our attachment?
Sorry, what?
What is it?
What do you mean? I don't understand. Say it another way.
We identify, the I we make up identifies with the feelings or the attachment.
I don't understand that. Say it in another way. Okay, so we've got...
So who is it then?
Okay, so... Sasha does. It's easy. You're Sasha, right? Who are you? Oh, who's Sasha? Oh, him. Okay. So you're Thomas. So, okay, this is where it's not tricky. You just got to think carefully. We've got to think carefully. There is no intrinsic Thomas. We can't understand what that means. We can't point out a separate Thomas. But at the same time, conventionally, Thomas is a valid name for this piece of property over there. No, wait a minute. You got to just not leap ahead. Conventionally, there is a Thomas sitting on that cushion, but ultimately, that we can't find, this is where we have to get the two things together. Conventionally, there is a Thomas there. So the Thomas is the label we give to this body and this mind. So Thomas is who feels attachment. Thomas is who makes up the stories, but not an intrinsic Thomas. That's the part that we have to get, and that's what takes time. You have to think. I mean, it just takes thinking, because there's concepts we're not used to thinking, that's all. And of course, they've got logic to it, but it just takes time to put them all together, that's all. So, in other words, saying, and it's a bit Tony's point the same, when we hear there is no Tony from his own side, or no Thomas, we immediately hear there's no Thomas, period. You just threw the baby out with the bathwater. That's a great saying in English. I don't know if you have it in German. It's a really brilliant saying. We over-exaggerated. We said, we assume when we say there is no intrinsic Tony, intrinsic Thomas, we're thinking it's saying there is no Thomas. That's too extreme. So the two truths. Ultimately, you cannot find there an A on those lines. A is projected by the mind. But there is an A that you do use when you spell the word cat. You put the A in there and it functions to help you understand the word cat. So it's really tricky. As Lama Zopa says, when you realize emptiness of A, it's as if there's no A. But there is an A, conventionally, that functions exactly as it should. There is no Thomas from the side of those aggregates, from the side of that thing there. You cannot find an ultimate Thomas. But there is a Thomas that bears the label that functions as Thomas, that was the son of that mother and goes and born and dies and creates karma. And it's putting these seemingly contradictory two truths together that's the secret to success. And as Lama Zopa says, when we realize emptiness of Thomas, it's as if there's no Thomas, but there is. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if he doesn't exist. And that's very tasty. That's from the yogi's experience. So it just needs lots of hard work and lots of logic and analysis and much meditating to put these things together. Well, I'm very happy for you. So, but I don't think you do, because you said it all wrong. So you don't integrate. You said the wrong words. If you said the right words, I'd agree with you, but you didn't say the right words.
But for me, this person, Thomas, comes up like when I'm very angry or...
That's when you just notice...
emotions, because I identify with this emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And then is where I feel this ego. And
Well,
I understand this is not the Thomas, but then what...
but that's a different discussion. We're not discussing that. You're discussing, like your first question was, who is it who is experiencing the anger? That's Thomas is experiencing the anger, but you're giving it an intrinsic status to Thomas, and you're giving an intrinsic status to the anger. So it's a subtler point that I'm making here. Of course, so a very good practical day-to-day practice is excellent, what you're just saying, but it's not the subtle one. That is to say, the anger is there. But like I said before, because we feel it so powerfully and we over-exaggerate its status and we feel it's who I am. That's another discussion, and that's coming to emptiness, but it's not the point I'm making. But it's a very excellent practice. When we do realize there is anger, there is love, there is compassion, there is these things, and we realize the delusions are adventitious and we can get rid of them and they're not the real me. That's another practice, but it leads us to emptiness, but it's not the emptiness one. But it's very helpful. Hang on a second. Sasha. Yes. Yeah.
So that means that my mind makes up after it moves that it's I. So the movement happens by itself, right?
I'm lost completely. I don't understand that point.
Let's say I'm walking on the street.
Yeah.
There's a thought thinking I'm walking.
Oh, yes, exactly. There's a thought, I am walking on the street. So, okay, exactly, a good example. So, ultimately, you see, so the mind... So let's say someone else walking. You see a person, you see them walking, so what your mind does, exactly the same with the A. You see the body and you see a body walk, making movements of putting one foot in front of the other. That's what you see. It's just a movement, but you label it, he is walking. And then ignorance causes you to believe that it's an inherent walking. It's coming from its own side, but you labeled it walking. If you've never heard of walking before, just like if you've never seen an A before, you wouldn't know that's called walking. It's only when you're called, that's called walking, Sasha, your mummy tells you, you then impute walking on it, but you forget that you labelled it that. And as one Lama said, we're like children who draw a lion and then become afraid of it. We forgot that we created it. That's samsara. But it's also quick. It happens in a millionth of a second, you know. First you see the lines, then you call it A, and then you believe in it. All that now then happens from then on. All these things come together, and you see there's A. And you think it comes from the A on the board. It doesn't. It comes from your mind calling it that. Because if you didn't ever know those three lines were A, you'd never see A for a million years. Yes?
It means that the movement of the body and speech and everything happens without the mind.
No, that's not the point at all. That's not the point at all. That's because of habit. If you see a person playing piano beautifully, you know it just doesn't happen by itself. It's the result of years of practice. Would you agree? Well, that's why you walk, because it's practice. You just practiced. And that's where if you get a stroke, you've got to start practicing again. But it's just, everything's habit. That's why anger rises automatically, because it's habit. It's only because it's habit. That's all. Walking, talking, doing everything because it's eons and eons of habit. That's why these sort of some group of monkeys or apes, I forget which kind, they come out of their mummy's womb and they turn around and they have sex with their mummy and their daddy and their auntie and their uncle and their sister and their enemies because they've got a very strong habit to have sex. It's just everything's habit. And that's karma. Everything we do is habit. Everything is habit. Programming from countless lifetimes. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just that. Are you hearing me? Okay, good. That's a good start. Who back there? What's your question, honey? What's your question? Sorry, what? Yes. Well, we're discussing what impermanence is grosser than emptiness, but never mind. If everything is impermanent, yeah. Go on. Well, that's one of the universal laws. It's not the subtlest one. Emptiness is the subtlest one. So what's the question? Yes, it is. Exactly. That's right. Everything. That's right. Okay, so there's a misunderstanding there in our view of what impermanence means. Because in Buddhism, it's got two distinct meanings. One is the grosser level of impermanence is that a cushion, you make the cushion, the pieces come together, and it disintegrates and it finishes. A tree grows and it dies. You get born and you die. That's gross impermanence, which is fairly evident, right? But the subtle impermanence is that things are changing moment by moment. So you can have a phenomenon like the mind that for the Buddha doesn't have a beginning and doesn't have an end, but it exists moment by moment in changingness. So that's a subtler impermanence. Impermanence doesn't imply that it just disappears. Something can exist for eternity and be impermanent in its nature. Do you understand? So your consciousness just think of it as a river of mental moments. So that's what it reincarnates, but it's changing moment by moment. That's subtle impermanence. Do you understand? Okay, good. Yes, Tony. Why does that assume physical?
Well, okay, let me just finish first. And then when you attain nirvana, it ceases to exist.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, that's very fascinating. Oh, okay, I understand. Well, first of all, I have no idea about the physical. That's not Buddha's view. And secondly, there's different views in Buddhism about what happens when you've achieved nirvana. So from the point of view in Buddhism of the Hinayana teachings, the teachings that you hear in Thailand and Burma, their interpretation of this view is that when you've realized emptiness and you've cut all the delusions, then when you die, you've disappeared. But the Mahayana does not have that view at all. Your mind is endless and beginningless, and it's not in its nature physical. Absolutely not one atom of physicality. You heard me reading. All I can do is quote the teachings. I'm not trying to say I'm so clever and I know it. All I can do is speak authentically of the teachings I've heard from my teachers on the Mahayana Buddhist point of view. And like I read in the book of Lama Yeshe, mind is not physical. It's beginningless, it's endless, it doesn't have a creator, it is not in its nature physical. But it's conjoined inextricably with the set of the... So they say, this is coming from the Hindus, talking in the Vajrayana model, we've got gross consciousness and gross body, these two here, inextricably linked. Eye consciousness is not the eyeball. Eye consciousness depends upon the eyeball to work to have a cognition of colour and shape. So then the subtle level of consciousness is... and this is how they talk in the Hindus as well, is inextricably linked with a subtle level of physicality, the prana, the wind energies, the subtle channels, the shushuma, all the subtle nervous system, and the kundalini energy. That's subtle physical energy. Not an object of the eye, but that's physical energy, and it's conjoined with subtle consciousness. And that's not, they're separate but together. You can't have them separate, but they are separate phenomena. And then you've got very subtle consciousness, inextricably linked with the very subtle wind energy. These are just the nature of the universe. And so as the Buddhists would say in the Vajrayana, which is the same as the Hindus, that the all minds, which are not physical, are linked inextricably with their own set of the four elements. So maybe that's what you're discussing. Your mind. Your mind, by removing the delusions from it. No, it doesn't. Even after attaining enlightenment. Then by the time if you've achieved nirvana, you become this blissful, radiant being who's existing in bliss. But if you're on the Mahayana path, you come back born again and again and again, and as a bodhisattva, manifesting in countless bodies to help sentient beings until you become a Buddha. And now you manifest in the universe to help others as long as time exists. You never stop manifesting in billions of bodies and billions of universes to help. As long as there are suffering sentient beings, baby, they're your job. Do you understand? Okay.
So the incarnations
Never stop, and it's effortless by then. You can do what you like, honey. You can manifest as universes, as dogs, as cats, as buildings. You can do what you like. You're in charge now. Yes. Sorry. Go on. Yes. Yeah. Of dependent arising, yes. Yep. Parts and then mind labeling, precisely. Mind labeling is the third one. But what do you mean? Exactly, that's right. Then? Yes. Oh, no, yes, yes. What it means... It doesn't mean... Okay, it doesn't mean there's not a cup conventionally sitting on this table just because... I'm not talking... We first of all conventionally. Because ultimately there's no cup. Even on... Yeah, but I'm trying to explain. Conventionally, whether you see it or not, my cup is existing here. I don't care what you see. But for you, there is no cup until you know the label cup. For you, there is no cup until you perceive the cup. I know already about those 3 lines. I know that. But you don't know yet. So it's not only real for you when you've labeled and perceived it. But it doesn't mean there's no cup. It's like if no one sees a tree in the forest falling down, there's no tree. It's not nihilism. It's not like that. It's the 3 lines on the blackboard, and you've never learned the alphabet. I mean, I look at Tibetan writing, and I do not know what those wiggles mean. I promise. Do you understand? But a Tibetan person knows beautifully. So that's real alphabet there for that person, conventionally. But for me, I don't know it until I learn it. But it doesn't mean there's no cup there apart from you. Are we not communicating? What's the problem? Start again. Ask your question again. Say the point again. Okay, give a simple example. Use the A. Use the cup. Do something. So what do you mean by I don't perceive it? What do you mean by that? You mean you mean your eyes aren't looking at this shape and color over here? At this moment in time, or last week, or what are you saying? At this moment in time, you're not looking at this shape and color over here. So then, what's the question?
So that it does exist independent from my mind, because it exists for all of you guys.
No, but that's not the point here. That's my point to you. It's not the point here. I already know that those 3 lines have the meaning of A. I know that. I've learned it. But you don't know that until you learn it. That doesn't, because you haven't learned it. When you look at those, a Tibetan person sees that word and can read it. I don't, because I haven't, but that doesn't mean there's no Tibetan word there. That's nihilism. That's the assumption of nihilism. So, but the point is, the real meaning is to try and understand what it means inherent and what it means conventional, dependent arising. That's all I can say. So is that useful or not useful or whatever? Yes, what's your question?
It was more like a chime to what Sasha was saying when I said walking, and I said I'm walking. So this is what we conventionally in our language and society agreed on.
On that movement. That's right. That movement is called walking, yes.
So, but how I understand it, we have to program ourselves that we get away from this a little bit, to judge or to label it. Is that correct?
No, that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Everything exists because we label it. Nothing wrong with labeling, but there's nothing wrong with, we've got to label because that's how things exist. But it's got to be the right label. Right now we say delicious divine chocolate cake that exists from its own side that'll make me happy. That's the biggest load of garbage you've ever heard in your whole life. There's nothing exists there at all like that. That's the wrong labeling. What about the walking? It is labeled. So that's the point. Those 3 lines do represent what we call A. So this is the point. When we've realized there's no A on those lines, there's no A coming from the lines, when we know it's merely labeled by our mind A, that's reality. And everything exists like that.
That we practice it every day through our language.
What?
That
Practice what?
We use a A, we use a word, we use walking.
Mm-hmm.
And you know it's about the habitual.
Then?
Because we interact with other people, we use language and symbols.
So what's the question?
The question is more that because I'm practicing every day when I talk to people,
Practicing what, darling?
use this labeling, the walking, the terms.
We're using words to talk to each other. Yeah, but so what's the question? What's the question?
How can we not label it?
By knowing that you are... No, you don't have to not label. You have to label because it is labeled. There's no other thing but label.
But didn't you say how I understand it that the A, when we say it's not an A, it's just 3 lines.
I didn't say that. I did not say that. I did not say that. I said there are 3 lines on the blackboard. And when you learn the alphabet, you learn that it's called A. But we forget that we called it A. We think the A is already there on the blackboard before you've learned it's A. That's what it means that we think exist already from their own side, like as, in other words, as if I have nothing to do with it.
So it's more about remembering.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, everything's merely labeled. No, wrong. No. The 3 lines are the base. This is the body, and this is the body, that's a knee. But the label knee comes from my mind for that piece in there. There's the piece and then there's the label. That's the point. There's I, there's the piece, and then we label it I. There's the piece of clay and the handle, and we label it cup. I mean, slowly, okay? Well, everything's difficult until you learn it. But it's not intrinsically difficult. Tibetan must be easy when you speak it. Swiss German must be easy when you speak it. But I don't know it, so for me it's difficult. Nothing's difficult. I mean, until you learn the words. That's why starting with a theory is a really easy way to learn. It's how we learn everything. Like as soon as people start talking about computers, I'm confused because I don't know the definitions of the words. So we don't, it's so difficult. No, because I've been lazy and haven't learned the words. That's all. Do you understand? And like anything, you say the words and slowly, you put meat on the bones. Some feeling comes for it, you know. That's why it's so important to have the right words. And that's where Tony can be a Hindu or he does what he likes. He can decide. That's why I just got to be clear and say the Buddhist views, and as opposed to, and he can decide what he ends up being a Hindu or I don't know what he can be, what he likes. You know, he can be a Tonyist. It's okay. It's his decision. Yes.
Is like this view on emptiness, which was invented sort of by Indians.
Not invented, no. Not invented. No, not invented. What would you say? A gardener doesn't invent botany. What do they do? It's a really important point. What is botany? What is botany? That's right, precisely. What is it? With that answer, you'll understand. It's a way that gardens work. It's a way of describing how gardens work. So a gardener didn't invent botany. They identified botany and they articulated it. Well, that's the same with emptiness. These clever people have... The Hindus didn't. We're talking Buddha here. That's where he diverged from the Hindus in his view of emptiness.
Okay, what like people hundreds of years ago invented?
Thousands. Didn't invent it, no. Identified. Buddha has identified that nothing has an intrinsic nature. He identified that reality. Like you identify maths or... That's right. Then, question?
Is that somehow linked to the idea of constructivism?
I have no idea. What's constructivism?
Like Noam Chomsky, people
I don't know. What do they say? Tell me. I haven't studied them. What do they say?
yeah, it's the same thing actually, but that was
Oh, I'm sure it's not the same thing, but tell me what they say.
that they say that it comes from semantics, that there's no actual meaning inside of a word.
Well, I don't know if that sounds like roughly like what Buddha says, but if Noam Chomsky and these constructivists, by their thinking, helps them get rid of anger and attachment, then they're on the right track. If not, then they're not on the right track. Are you getting my point?
Okay, but
I bet it doesn't. I have no idea. I haven't studied them. I don't know. But what I'm getting at, and this is why I find it interesting, let's say, they talk about in science about quantum physics and all that stuff, that how it sounds like understanding emptiness. But the bottom line is for the Buddha, by realizing emptiness, it helps you get rid of delusions. So if you can understand quantum physics and get less angry and less attached, then it's really got some benefit. If you can be a constructivist and everything and it helps you become a more kind person and practice morality, then you're on the right track. But I've got a sense that all the theories we have in our Western view, forgive me for trying to not be too arrogant here, just get us to become very clever. But it doesn't seem to affect our lives. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's the biggest point, I think, that's really massive. The only reason to realize emptiness is to get rid of delusions and stop suffering and to stop harming others. If it's just to be a clever person and pass your exams in philosophy, then you're missing the point completely, And that's, I think, the part of it. Our culture, knowledge, seems to just bring more cleverness, but not any morality. There's a complete distinction. So if constructivism, really, if you practice it, and if it is really that, it helps you become a better person, then it's fantastic. Then it's doing what Buddha says. Do you understand? Mm. What else, people? Yeah. Self, yes. The independent self. The independent I doesn't exist. That's right. Yeah. That's right, precisely. Precisely, exactly the same. Yes. I know, it's curious. I know this is very interesting because in the teachings they say that we first have to realize the emptiness of the I and then we can realize the emptiness of external phenomena. But it does seem easier, doesn't it? I know. I mean, always think of a prison, for example. So, if I defined a prison, I'd say it's an ugly place where you're sent when you're naughty that you can't escape from. Well, certainly in America anyway. I mean, the further north you go in Europe, the nicer prisons are. I've got this guy from Norway who was emailing me saying he's really looking forward to going to prison next. In 6 months' time, he had a 2-year prison sentence. He's looking forward to it because he can study and really do good things while he's, it's like, wow, That's fantastic for him. But in America, you don't want to go to prison, I promise. So the point this is my point, about that woman. She was able to literally relabel it. Now, the point about labeling, this is very fascinating. If we hear there's no prison from its own side, then we think, well, we can call anything anything. It sounds like nihilism. You can do what you like. But no, the first thing you've got to do is define something. So if we define a prison, think, cut, a knife. A knife is a long piece of metal that you can cut something with. That's a good definition. So it's got 2 parts. A definition has 2 parts usually. The first part tells you its conventional characteristics. It's a piece of metal with a sharp edge. But then you've got to say, well, what does it do? It cuts things. That's a good definition. Now, so then we think, well, there's no intrinsic knife. Then we can call it anything we like. No, it has to function in the way you defined it. So if you say, you can say this is a knife, it could function to cut a soft thing, couldn't it? So you could argue for that moment you could label it a knife because it does function to cut something. But you can't just make up and say anything. It's got to function. So the way they say it is, ultimately, there is no cup from its own side, but conventionally, it functions to hold my tea. And this is putting together the 2 truths, so it can never go sailing off into nihilism, It's really grounds. This is the key thing of the Tsongkhapa praises Buddha for his teachings on the 2 truths, on dependent arising and emptiness. He put these 2 together, you can never just go on into nihilism and say there is nothing from its own side. But when we understand, like that woman seemed to, there's no intrinsic prison. So, I mean, many people I know in prison go mad because it is ugly. They are sent there. They might be naughty, but even worse if they're not naughty and they've been wrongly blamed, people go crazy because they really believe, because it's prison, you've got to suffer. Whereas that woman could see, they couldn't take my mind from me. So she called it something different. She said, I decided I'm not a prisoner. I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell. I'm in a cave. But it fits the definition. She was able to sit there and meditate and do yoga. So that's a valid statement, and that's emptiness. And when we can do this, we're liberated. Do you understand? I mean, this is where even talking yesterday, Nina was saying, oh, I'm tired. I'm saying I'm tired, So therefore we assume we have to be miserable. Well, your body's not your mind. You can be tired, your body can be aching, and you have a happy mind. But it's a revelation to us. But we just assume so many things because we're so caught up in rubbish. I'm in prison, I've got to be miserable. I've got a bad knee, I've got to be unhappy. No, you don't. You can label it differently. And that's the more advanced level. They call it transforming problems into happiness. And that's based on understanding emptiness. It's incredible. It's so powerful. And that is really when we can be liberated. Right now, we're paralyzed by believing I've got to have nice things and no pain, then I can be happy. But when we really understand emptiness, we can call any damn thing we like, And it's really powerful practice, calling your suffering something good because you're finishing up the karma. And be happy about it. Like that woman in prison. Amazing. What else, you people? Yes.
So would you say that it would be the first step, the beginning step, trying, attempting those
Emptiness. Yeah.
things to actually be aware of the moment by moment of how our mind labels things, how our
Yeah.
mind perceives things?
That's where high school, where we learn Buddhist psychology, we learn about what a delusion is, we learn what a virtue is, we learn what the third category, we learn the way the mind works. That's there before you even get to emptiness. That's why that is so absolutely. And learning this whole way, the mechanics of how we function. Absolutely. That's exactly right. And start with attachment and aversion, because they're also just projections. And then that prepares us to go to the subtle level of understanding emptiness. Absolutely. That's what is so unique. That Buddha's view is so precise, so particular, It comes from these Indians. If you've studied the Hindus, it comes from them. These genius Indians were the ones. But then Buddha diverged in his own direction, But that's exactly right. Learning to understand how the mind labels things, angry, beautiful, ugly, this, that, and how that comes from our mind. That's right. And that leads us to really understand the deeper level. Absolutely. But that implies we have to learn to recognize in our mind what's going on. And that's the tough one. Because we don't notice until this becomes a full-blown emotion. And it's way too late by then, And that means we have to understand, like we were talking before you came in, wasn't it, or not? I forget. How our feelings, our emotions, is when our body's involved, is just the tip of the iceberg. It's way too late to notice you're angry when you're about to kill somebody. You've got to notice the conceptual stories that inform that emotion that have been raging on underneath as strong practice, beforehand. That's the real work in learning to know your own mind. Be your own therapist, as Lama Yeshe puts it. Then we're ready to realize emptiness. Absolutely. Can't just leap into it, Got to prepare ourselves. Absolutely. Yes. No, nothing. Absolutely, utterly and completely nothing. And again, in all the Hindu views and the very many Buddhist views, there are many arguments, debates about all this. But the view that we're describing here, the only one I can speak about, is the view that's the Prasangika Madhyamika view, the middle way view of this particular school of thought, which is said to be the real meaning of what Buddha says. Everything that does exist has to be empty of intrinsic existence. Because, in fact, emptiness of intrinsic existence is what causes things to exist in the first place. There can't be anything. In other words, speaking just real simple, the implication of not empty means it doesn't depend on something. Even the most simple way we understand the universe, everything exists in dependence upon something. We say in English, you don't exist as an island. You don't exist in isolation. That's the meaning of emptiness. Nothing can exist on its own without depending on something. So the Buddha would say nothing can exist without depending on causes, nothing can exist without depending on parts, and nothing can exist without the mind calling it that. And they're the levels of it, Everything necessarily is empty of intrinsic existence, and that's how come things exist. Nothing could exist without that. That's the point. Yes.
I'm not sure how to frame, but how can me and cool be different understanding
Because there are different human beings with different understandings. This is how it is.
that some person has done something very wrong?
You could argue that. You could say that, yeah. But maybe not. Maybe it's like this.
There are like Bodhisattvas
Yes.
come back and teach us
That's right.
why we should all things.
Oh, because we're different. It's an easy answer. It's an easy answer. It's an easy answer. When you're 2, if your mother teaches you like a 5-year-old, you're lost. If you're 7 and she teaches you like a 16-year-old, so you've got to know the person's mind and know what's right for that person's mind. I mean, that's the answer. But that's the answer. Buddha taught different things for different people. They're Buddha's teachings. That's the answer. Not everyone's got the same level. We know that, surely. So Buddha taught different things for different people. And there can indeed be wrong views, yes. But they even say when you're going through these views, when you study Buddhist philosophy, you study Buddhist tenets, and you learn all these different views, you know. And so they say you need, the real way to go to the final one is to progress through the other views. You got to get rid of the other layers. You can't just leap to the right one. You've got to go through the stages. So in that sense, they're valid. They lead you. And all of these teachings are arguments that have come from real positions of real minds. And so at different stages, you only can understand certain things, which sort of makes sense. Are you satisfied with that answer? Huh? Okay. Yes.
You had a question about reincarnation.
Yes.
Excuse me, I would like to have more clarity about it.
Yes.
So I was thinking whether it's an attempt to give permanence to one's existence.
By whom? Whose attempt? I understand. Good point. But who's doing it? Who's attempting? So that implies someone made it up at some point, doesn't it? That's a perfectly fine view, but speak it out. Someone must have decided to say that reincarnation exists. So who are you suggesting said that? But who suggested it? Where did it start?
I don't know, because years ago, societies existed based upon belief systems. That was the basic ground to hold together societies.
Who said? What are you talking about? Who said? Who said? Well, I mean, stop. I'm not interested in belief systems. We're not talking belief here. We're talking reality. If you say mathematics, you're saying somebody invented math. That's a really good point. So you would never say that about mathematics, would you? That someone invented mathematics. They didn't invent mathematics, did they?
With mathematics, you can explain.
There you go. Perfect point. Thank you. You just made the point. Okay. Okay. Listen. Shh. I'm answering you. I'm giving you a way of thinking. Good. I'm very happy. The Buddha's saying, okay, we have a thing called botany. Do you agree, like we said here, that botany is a label we give to the way gardens work? Would you call it that? And some clever human beings along the way have, by using their intelligence, have observed gardens and have articulated those laws. Would you agree with that? So you would agree that they didn't just make it up into a belief system. It's a truth, isn't it? That they can prove by showing they've seen what is growing, they've labelled it certain things, and they put it together as a series of laws. Would you agree with that? And you can then learn it yourself and prove it, can't you? So we call that science, don't we? Do you agree with that?
Right, yeah.
Okay, good. Very good. Mathematics the same. Some clever Arab fellow argued with those dumb idiot, Italians where they had their L's and their V's and their X's, and he came up with the 0 to 9. Look at the genius of that. He didn't make up numbers, did he? There's always, in other words, before we came up with from 0 to 9, if there were 2 oranges on that floor, you didn't know it was called 2, but there always were those 2 oranges, weren't there? So he articulated that law, and it's called numbers. Do you agree with that? That's called mathematics. You agree with that? He didn't make up a belief system, did he? He saw reality and labelled it, and then we can prove it, can't we? Do you agree with this? Buddha's the same. Please wait. Don't just say okay and then leap ahead. You should be shocked by this. So Buddha is a person. Please wait. Let me finish. But you haven't. I've got to finish. Then you have to go back. You're suggesting that there can be belief systems that people have made up, and I agree with you. Buddha would say we made up a creator. He would argue that isn't reality. I'm just telling you his view. I'm not saying he's right or wrong. I'm trying to work on it. But he would agree with you that a creator does not exist. He would say we've over-exaggerated. He uses the term, for example, superior being. And he would say you, by following the steps that he took, can rid the mind of all the delusions, can develop all your goodness to perfection, and you can become a superior being. And he says, I did this, here's my methodology, and this is something that's natural and real, and goodbye, darling. Bye. See, sweetheart. And it's a doable thing. It's not a belief, it's a doable thing. Then he would say there are some views that over-exaggerate that superior energy and call it a creator. He would disagree with that piece. So he would say that's made up. He would agree with you. But what he is suggesting, what he is saying is real, like botany, like mathematics. And he says, this is what I've done, this is what I've achieved, and here's my methodology. Please let me finish. So, like Einstein tells us that he has discovered that E equals mc squared. He says, here is my methodology. He would not tell us he made it up, would he? He would not say he had a vision of it. He doesn't say he had a dream, and he's not asking us to believe it. He's saying, here's my methodology. Now you've got to go through each of those steps, and you'll prove it for yourself. Buddha's exactly the same. And it's up to you to discover whether it's true or not. We're now communicating.
It's a way to see the reality for oneself. The thing is, if I take science as a parallel and say that's the same, it's like going to say it's true, argumenting based on the truth of other realities. But
What? No, I'm lost. Sorry, say it again.
so,
What?
so if I say that botany is true because you can prove it by
Doing it.
examining it.
By doing it. By doing it, yes. You prove it by doing it, yes. So then? Then?
I would like to see if to see how we can prove it the same way
Which? To prove what?
with reincarnation.
It's all there in the teachings. It's up to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the moment I believe in it, and
No, don't believe in it. No, you don't. No. Stop. No. But I won't finish. No, but your words are wrong. You're not saying the right thing. You don't just believe in botany. You hear the teachings. You hear what the botanist tells you, and you go one step at a time, ticking the box as you go, proving it. Oh, well, he told me that's true so far. Now go to grade 2, grade 3. You don't just believe in botany. You prove it as you go. It's the same here. And if at some point you can prove the botanist is wrong, then you've proven he's wrong. Same with reincarnation. Same with karma. Same with emptiness. Same with mathematics. There is no difference.
so everyone has to experience.
Yes! That's right. But our problem in the West is very fascinating. We'll say, oh, but you can't prove reincarnation. But people have proved relativity. Well, have you proved relativity? No, because someone else has proved it doesn't mean it's right for you. And we don't realize that. We think, oh, good enough that Einstein's proved it. No, it's a belief for you until you've proven it. And Buddha's saying you can prove it. Whereas this is the point about, I'm not being critical. Other religions, creative religions, you can't prove it because that's saying you're like God, and that's the worst sin possible. So you must believe it. And that's what we think of as religion. Do you understand my point? Whereas Buddha says it's natural law. There's no concept for the Buddha other than anything you can prove. But you've got to go one step at a time, baby. And you're the boss. As Dalai Lama said, if you go along and you can prove at some point what Buddha's wrong, then he's not going to be upset. You just say, thanks, Buddha, bye, and keep moving. Do you see my point? It's a bit of a shock to us because we have an assumption because reincarnation is something you can't see with your eyes, therefore can't be proved. But that's a false assumption. When you've got single point of concentration, you can prove reincarnation easily. You can see your own past life right there. Takes you a couple of years. Won't take you long. What?
Trying to get it from
I know, exactly.
the point of view of mind and matter and how this makes sense if you follow how your mind actually, like how your body and mind disintegrates and well,
Your mind doesn't disintegrate. Your mind continues. Buddha's view. You see, in order to understand acupuncture, you've got to take a series of assumptions. You've got to take a series of hypotheses, don't you? You know, if you've learned allopathic medicine all your life, and you hear about these weird wacko people who put needles in people and talk about meridians, you've never heard of such a weird thing. So you've got to take it as a given in the beginning before you study it, don't you? You've got to sort of kind of hold your breath and say, okay, let's take the view that it could be true. Then you start to prove it. But you can't fit it into allopathy. What do you call it? You can't fit the views are going to be coherent in themselves, within their own sets of rules, don't they? And all you can do is do that. It's very methodical, and then you start with believing in it because you've checked up that these acupuncturists seem to be good people. So you've got to start with a hypothesis, but then you've got to engage in it where you now become an acupuncturist. And now it's real for you. But we mostly don't do that. We just accept that other scientists have proved things. We think that's good enough. That's just intellectual laziness. I mean, you understand? And throughout the history, millions of people have proved reincarnation by practicing. We just say, oh, it's not possible. We're so arrogant in our culture, you know. Not saying you're arrogant, just saying we are generally. There's so much hubris in our materialist world. Are you good? Thank you very much. You Swiss Germans are nice people. Not Swiss Germans, you're Swiss. Oh, you're Swiss. That means you're Swiss people, that's right. I get confused where I am. Yes, sweetheart. Oh, isn't there really? Oh my God. Go on.
In order to learn
Yes.
Do we get to emptiness first?
No, not at all. Depends on the person. Some people who've got sharper tendency might get emptiness first. Other people with a bigger heart might get compassion first, but you've got to have both together. And compassion won't really become powerful until you realize emptiness. Because there's always going to be an intrinsic me having compassion for intrinsic you. When we realize emptiness, it'll be powerful compassion. It'll be as if we're the same, you know. Yeah. Yes, Tony. Yes, Tony.
I've heard from two sources in the past. One source was the Catholic Church, another source was a Hindu source. And both say that you should never go to faith healers who heal you mentally.
Yes, I understand.
Genuine and not charlatans.
Yes.
Can really heal you. They say you should not go to them because they can be bad. And I'm just wondering what the reason might be. Is that because maybe they don't take away the bad karma that's causing you, they just stop the karma, and then you'll get that back again maybe in the future then? Could that be the reason?
But I mean, a healer, whether they're called faith healer or a physical healer, I think fantastic to find somebody who can help you get better. I think it's a superstition to think a faith healer in their nature is weird.
I don't think it's weird.
Well, I don't think it's weird either. If a person's a valid person who's really understand how to help people, then a regular doctor who gives you pills is the same. What's the difference?
Yeah,
There's no difference.
the doctor is kind of healing you on a physical level, and it's your karma to be healed maybe by the doctor. I take your point.
Yeah.
I don't really understand, that's why I'm asking.
I wouldn't have that view, but I wouldn't have that view.
You don't agree?
No, of course I wouldn't. But I'd say check the person you go to make sure they're valid. That's all I'd say. My goodness.
But these two sources do say you should generally not go to faith.
Oh, it just sounds like superstition. You can't say don't do. I disagree with that. Well, there's people who use some kind of religion to heal you.
Faith healer is somebody, I just use this terminology, maybe it's the wrong terminology, but it's just somebody who can, if you have some kind of illness, through mental powers, they can heal you.
The Lamas do this. The Tibetan Lamas are genius healers. They're faith healers. They're incredible. The Tibetan Lamas are unbelievable. They can heal you just by looking at you, by saying mantras. They can heal you. They're incredible. They're magicians. They're amazing, powerful people. So there are people like this. Yeah, perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that. I don't know. Well, that's not my view anyway. So, what else, people? It's 3:30. That's the 4 opponent powers. Yes, my coffee's water's cold. I'm sorry. Well, I mean, no. Okay, purification is very practical. If we understand how we create karma, we can understand how we purify it. So let's look at how we create karma. It's very practical. So, okay. Your mind is the main one. Intention, the word intention, not meaning good intention, but meaning I will, volition. This is the start of the entire process of creating karma. So as Lama Zopa says, there's a saying in Tibetan, everything exists on the tip of the wish, the thought, I will. So even by walking out that door, you know, it has to be the thought first. I will walk out the door. The trouble is, though, most of what we do is programmed. So we do everything automatically. We're 99% unaware of what we're doing because we're programmed in doing it, you know, mentally and physically. So, but the process of creating karma is it has to be the mind involved. I'll use this example. You know, an action of generosity, a complete action of generosity, which is one that sows a seed in and puts it into your bank vault that becomes a seed that will ripen in the future as one of your future lives. A complete action of morality, such as, say, generosity, there have to be 4 things in place. There has to be an object, a person. Then there's your mind involved in doing it. And there's 2 parts there. Intention, I will give 20 francs. And the motivation is compassion. There's 2 things. Intention and motivation. 3rd, you give the 20 francs. 4th, the person accepts it. That's a complete action of generosity. An action of killing would be the same. There's a being. There's an intention, I will kill the mouse. Motivation, anger, how disgusting a mouse being in my kitchen. The mind involved. 3, you do the action. 4, dead mouse. So that's a complete action. One is called positive, one is called negative. And the key factor in both of those actions that makes one of them virtuous and the other non-virtuous isn't the giving of the 20 francs, isn't the killing of the action of the killing, it's the motivation of wanting to benefit or wanting to harm. So that one piece in there, that's the key factor, the motivation that impels what we think and do and say. Intention is a decision to do it, but the motivation is what gives the character to the entire action that labels it negative or positive, such that it sows a seed in our bank vault, puts a seed into our good bank vault or our bad one, that'll ripen in the future as suffering or happiness. The motivation is the central piece. So this is the point, for example, like I said, about a person can be there and you walk past the homeless person and you even have the thought, I'm not going to give money to that ugly person, but the money drops out of your pocket. But you don't know. So then it is not, but your mind is not even involved. So there's zero virtuous karma because you didn't intend to do it and because there's no decent motivation. Equally, you can stand on a mouse. The mouse is there, you did the action, the mouse died, but you never saw the mouse. So there's no intention and there can't be a motivation. So the mind involved in what we do is what creates karma. And the key factor in there between intention and motivation, the one that gives it the character of being virtuous or non-virtuous, is the motivation. And as what Buddha's saying is that most of everything that we all do is motivated by attachment. It's completely the default mode. We can have virtue on top of it. We've got some virtuous qualities, there's no question. But what drives us most of the time, because we're not aware until we start practicing, it's to get what I want. We're happy to be kind to people within my getting what I want. I can be very kind to Nina, but if she starts wanting to come home with me every single day and get in my bed and moan and complain, I'm going to get fed up and I'm going to stop having compassion. I'll be compassionate once a day, but when I'm not getting what I want, thank you very much. So motivation for most of us is attachment. It sounds a bit depressing. That's what practice is, to change our motivation. So motivation's the key. And that's what then sows the seeds in our mind. And then they're going to ripen either as a rebirth, as a habit to keep doing it, as an experience similar to it, or as an environmental result. So that, as Lama Zopa says, that entry-level junior school grade 1 practice, at least refrain from the 10 non-virtuous actions. Buddha exhorts us to don't kill, steal, or create sexual misconduct. And then don't lie, badmouth behind backs, use abusive language, or rabbit on about nothing. 7 little baby things. And the last 3 are the beginnings of working on our mind. At least refrain from the grossest levels of attachment, which is like intense craving, the grossest levels of anger, which is like ill will, wanting people to suffer, and the grossest levels of ignorance, like fundamentalism and narrow-mindedness. They're the 10 little instructions that Buddha would exhort us to abide by as a starting point. That's the first level of practice. Control your body and speech and begin to control your mind. Now, though, what about all the billions of seeds we've already planted that we're carrying with us in our bank vaults from life to life? We've got to start putting atomic bombs under them to prevent them from ripening as our suffering. This is the next level of practice, and that's called purification. And it's very practical, because the mind creates karma, so the mind purifies karma. There's 4 main little steps in it. The 4 R's, easy way to remember. We do this at the end of the day. Lama Zopa says we're insane not to do this practice every day. So the first step is to acknowledge I badmouthed Tony, I kicked the dog, I lied, whatever baby things we do. If you killed your mother as well, regret that one. The first step is regret. You own the fact that you did something. They use the analogy of having taken poison. The good analogy. If you've eaten poison, because you know the meaning of poison, you know it's going to cause you future suffering, you instantaneously will deeply regret, oh my God, what an idiot, I can't believe I've taken poison. Quick, what can I do about it? That's the attitude of regret. So regret isn't guilt, like I'm a bad person. No. I killed, I stole, I lied, I did this, did that, cheated, whatever. And you think of today, then you think of this life in general, and then you can say, and whatever I've done since beginningless time that has harmed sentient beings, that is sowing seeds in my mind that will ripen as my suffering, I regret from the depths of my heart. Why? Because I don't want suffering. It's like compassion for yourself. It's like you don't want diabetes, so you regret eating that sugar. You don't want cancer, so you regret smoking those cigarettes. It's that attitude, not guilt, not beating yourself up, but intelligence, self-respect. That's regret, first step. Then second, whom can I turn to? Where's the doctor? So Buddha's our doctor here. We rely upon him, not to forgive us, which is the Christian teaching, very different. We rely upon the doctor, Buddha, whose medicines we will use ourselves to heal ourselves. Then the second part of this section, in the second part, when it's reliance, we then have compassion for those we've harmed. I then think of Tony and how I harmed him with my harsh speech. and have compassion and and then regret for his sake, and then everybody else I've harmed. And then if we're brave enough, we can have compassion for those who've harmed us, because they will suffer in the future. Then the third step, you take the remedy. So you can have, Buddhism's got a whole medicine cabinet of remedies. And even every day, they often call this one applying the antidote. Well, if I'm regretting killing, an antidote is to help people, to save lives. Every day I should do that. If I'm regretting lying, an antidote is to speak the truth. But here, and we do this in a formal meditation practice, we would do it as a meditation. We visualize a particular Buddha, Vajrasattva, above our crown. We'd visualize nectar. We're just using visualization, nectar coming, purifying, while reciting a particular mantra. These are said to be very potent meditations, using the Buddha. It gives an extra power. So the third step is you do this meditation, and that's the antidote, that's the remedy. And the fourth step, the most important, Pabonka Rinpoche says, is the resolve, the determination not to do it again. So you give yourself a timeline. I can't say I won't badmouth Tony every day if I do it every day, but maybe I won't badmouth him for 24 hours. If I can say I'll never kill again, I'll say I'll never kill again. So you make decisions to change. That's when the real change comes. So as Lama Yeshe says, purification is the power of the regret, the ownership, the power of the reliance, the power of the remedy, and the power of resolve. And as he says, we create negative karma with our mind. So we purify it. We create, we create negativity with the mind, so we can purify it by creating positivity with the mind. It all comes down to the mind, And there's no karma that can't be purified, because karma is impermanent. There's no negative action that we can't fix, that we can't change, that we can't purify, provide an antidote to, get rid of, remove from the mind. Okay? That's the essence of it. Yes. As a key factor that determines whether it's negative or positive, what we do. Not even the intention, the motivation. That's right.
So, and the motivation is more that I create this karma for myself.
That's better than nothing. It's perfectly fine. Don't worry about that one.
Do it out of compassion.
Darling, it's too advanced to do it out of compassion first. That's expecting too much of yourself. That's absurd. You can pretend. We've got to say it. But it's a really intelligent okay, right now, we do everything thinking we're doing it for ourselves, but all we're doing is harming ourselves. So to change to want to do things so you'll get some good results from it, like eating good food so you get healthy, no one criticises you for doing that. They don't say you're selfish. I mean, no one says, you've got to eat good food so you can be helpful to others. That's very advanced. Start with at least wanting to do something useful so you'll get the result. Nothing wrong. My goodness, that's intelligent. Then eventually you add compassion to it. Of course you do. That makes it very powerful. Of course it does, darling. But then we would never want to be angry. If we really realise that anger will cause us suffering, how intelligent that you want to stop being angry because you want to suffer. But we don't even get that much. We're so dumb, And then we feel, that sounds so inferior, like you said. That's really wrong thinking. You've got to start where you're at. Do you understand?
Yeah, I just was thinking there's a difference. It's a little bit better if you do it out of compassion.
Oh, you're missing the point completely. It's 1 billion times better. But but how can you just invent compassion? You've got to first recognise this is the whole point about the wisdom wing. You've got to first recognise what's helpful for you. Then you can have compassion for others. You've got to learn nutrition first and see the benefits for yourself. Then you can help others. So, of course, in the beginning you do it with compassion, but in the beginning, of course, it's phony. But be delighted that your good virtue will bring you good results. That's utterly necessary. In fact, the very first point of Buddha, he says don't kill for your sake, baby. Do you hear? No, we don't hear this point. I'll say it very clearly again. We tend to think I shouldn't kill because I'm naughty and I might get punished, or someone vaguely said I shouldn't do it. That's not enough reason. Jesus says don't kill, and that's okay because God said not to do it. The Buddha says don't kill because guess what? Because you're going to go to the lower realms, you will get killed, you will be harmed, and you'll have suffering. So do you want suffering or don't you? Do you want suffering in the future? I'm asking you a question. Well, then stop killing now. That's Buddha's logic. It is only for your sake first. Then can come compassion. Do you hear my point? This takes a while because his view of karma has got nothing to do with punishment and reward, which is our usual view. So we try to be good girls and we hope someone will reward us. No, you'll be waiting a long time. You reward yourself. We're in charge. This is the point about karma. So you've got to realize it's for your benefit. Don't think it's inferior. It's intelligent. Because the Buddha's point is every millisecond of what we think and do and say brings consequences to me. First step, got to realize that one. Then who in their right mind would want to not practice morality? But we're so addicted to the dualistic view of being a good girl and a bad girl. And that's why if someone sees us do something good, we hope they will reward us. But that's why we want to hide our naughty things, because we don't want to get punished. Well, that's as foolish as thinking that because your doctor told you not to smoke, because you might get cancer, and then you go home and you realise your doctor's not there, so out come the Marlboros. Oh, I won't get cancer because she doesn't see me smoke. Everyone would laugh at you, right? So you realise yourself that it's a natural law that not smoking will help you get healthy. No one thinks that's inferior. Same here. Do you understand? So important. Yeah.
So you say motivation is at the source. There's the bad motivation, which is based on attachment.
But attachment, anger, jealousy, the usual dramas, poor old me, yeah.
There's, let's say, the beneficial motivation for helping others, compassion. Is it the same source finally, or is there
What do you mean by that? Same source.
Where does motivation come from?
What do you mean by that? Sorry. It's a good question. What do you mean, though? I don't get it.
I mean, I'm motivated to speak now to you.
What, darling?
When I speak to you, there's a motivation that I want to speak to you.
Okay.
Where does motivation come from?
No, okay. Again, first of all, it's down to the same thing. You walk because you've got the habit of walking. You talk. But just to say you talk because you want to talk is more than that. If I'm all needy and love and wanting you to love me, I'm going to talk to you because I want you. It's attachment completely because I want you to see me and hear me and praise me. That's a rubbish motivation. But the reason if I want to talk to you because I want to help you, that's compassion. It's completely different. But normally we're driven just by attachment and we're unaware of it. We don't even notice why we do things. So we've got to start changing it and being conscious and changing our motivation and therefore changing our behaviour. Maybe there's no reason to talk to you instead of wasting your time, So we've got to become conscious and then decide to have a virtuous motivation. Do you understand?
Yes, but I still believe there's something driving that motivation, which comes from our heart or our soul.
But listen. Okay. If you've practiced compassion in the past, it will come naturally as your motivation, won't it? If you've practiced the piano, then you'll be able to play it if you sit at the piano. But if you've never practiced it, you won't be able to play. So if you've practiced compassion, that will be the default view that you'll have. So it comes from practice. Whatever your motivation, you've got to look at what your motivation is. It comes from having practiced whatever it is. If you're a very self-centered person, very attached, very angry, that'll be your motivation. So you've got to look at that and notice it and recognize it and then decide to change it. Motivation is just a thought. But most of the time, like with walking, everything's habitual. We've never even looked at any of this. We just get born in this life and just keep doing it. Like the monkey just has sex because that's their habit. We just fall into habits, Hmm? Yeah, but that's just a way of saying attachment and aversion. Attachment right now is the craving to get what I want every second. Yeah, of course. But the wish to be happy. If you're a bodhisattva, they also have the wish to be happy, but they know the right method. Of course. So that determines the thing you do. You want to be happy, that's why you eat. But if you've got the wrong understanding of nutrition, you always get suffering. So you always want to be happy. Yeah, of course. But you have to have the right method, which is having virtuous thoughts and not having non-virtuous thoughts. It all comes down to being aware and conscious of what's happening in here, and then changing. Do you understand? So then, what else is to talk about? We've talked about everything. I think practically. Not really, but sort of. Yes.
More question.
Thomas.
Practical as well.
Yes, sweetheart.
So, let's say I would like to devote myself for 2-3 years to develop shamatha.
Okay, good.
What would you advise?
Okay,
Start
I will
with
tell
the
you.
goal to
I will
achieve
tell
to
you.
get a
I will
better
tell
shamatha?
you. I will tell you. If you really want to do it seriously, you've got to really be serious. You want to be serious, like Renee.
For example?
The Swiss monk. Okay, that means you've got to give up attachment to food, sex, mortgages, people, things, jobs. You've got to already got to be quite advanced. You've got to not care what you wear, what you eat. You've got to be able to walk away right now to some place in isolation with really good teachings from having practiced for a couple of years so that you can then begin to get concentration. But Rene said, and he's been a monk for like 40-something years, well, I think, yeah, and he's been practicing for 40 years, concentration, meditation, as well as everything else. And when I interviewed him in 95 about this retreat he did, 2.5 years, he said there was no way he'd be qualified to even get to the mountains to do the retreat without having first lived as a monk, having given up sex, drugs and rock and roll, without having done several years of study, and without doing already several years of even teaching. That was the basis. So the answer to your question is start with controlling your body and speech and doing the 10 non-virtues and doing your purification, take the 5 lay vows, and then you go on from there.
So there's no point like to go to a cave and sit down and
No, darling. Unless you're highly advanced already, that you within 5 minutes you'll go crazy or you'll leave, one or the other. Do you understand? Okay, good. So start today. Control your body, speech and mind. That's it.
But may I ask why not? Because when you start the meditation, you just go crazy and all the things.
Because you have no idea what your mind is. You don't know what a delusion is. We don't know what a virtue is. We have no control. We think about the weather. We think about our body. We think about the food. We think about the girls. We think about the mortgage. We think about all these millions of things that are occupying our life right now. So to even go away for one day in isolation. I remember reading recently this is very funny actually, about these guys who are gamblers, and they gamble, they will bet on anything. So this one guy bet $100,000 to his friend that he would close himself in a bathroom and turn the lights off and live there for 1 month. So he took the bet. But he nearly went mad. And they agreed they'd go back and forth with their betting. And then they agreed he'd give him $70,000 if he came out after 3 weeks. But so the assumption in our culture is you become mentally ill, you go completely crazy because we just don't know what to do with our mind. So and he just managed, but it had nothing to do with his mind. That's why people in prison all go crazy when they're put into isolation. Because we don't know what our mind is, we don't know what a delusion is, we don't know we have no methods, we don't know how to work with our mind, we don't understand it, and we assume you're mentally ill if you live on your own. Because we think of ourselves as social beings, we think we have to be made human by being around others. Very different views, but there's no understanding what to do with the mind in our culture. There isn't. So unless you come to this life with a lot of qualities already, don't even bother trying to go to a cave. Many people go mad because what happens, many people, you go to meditate. I've met so many people like this. You go to meditate because they've got some past experience from past lives. They don't know that. They have a special feeling. So they think they're kind of radiant. The one prisoner went completely crazy because he thought he was a special meditator. Another guy was a Brazilian fellow. He used to leave his body during the night and travel around visiting his girlfriend in Melbourne and going to Africa. You can do that. That's part of practice. We're highly realized beings, but he didn't know about that. So he'd go almost nuts, One woman came to do some practice and she got a lot of bliss. She'd sit there like a vampire doing Tara meditation, trying to get bliss every day, thinking that bliss is spiritual teachings. So we have no idea what to do. This guy in prison had some capacity to concentrate. He didn't know why, but he was completely insane. He wrote to Lama Zopa, convinced he was enlightened, and wanted Lama Zopa to announce he was enlightened, because we don't understand about attachment. The guy who was traveling around, astral traveling, which is what you can do when your mind's developed, he didn't know why he could do it. He thought he was special. So giving attachment sounded so boring to him. So we don't know about our minds. People go mad because the mind is so powerful, and also because since beginningless time, the Buddha would say, there's nothing we've ever experienced that has disappeared from our mind. Everything is stored there. As Lama Zopa says, it's like our mind is like, or Geshe Tashi in London said, it's like we're like shooting a movie all day. Everything we ever experience is stored in our mind as memories. So if you sit for 5 minutes without knowing it, stuff's going to come up. And you have no idea what it's all about or how to interpret it. So it's a massive job to do. Do you understand? So you've got to be really prepared. It makes sense. But we don't understand this in our culture. We have no understanding, with respect to us, no understanding of the internal workings of the human mind. We understand the brain. We're geniuses, That's why we all go crazy. Isn't it? So go slowly. Start one step at a time. Just, one step at a time. What else, people? I think it's enough, isn't it? Have you had enough? You people? Nothing? Sure, darling, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. No, I understand that. Well, that's where we would formalise to take refuge and take the layperson's vows. So let me talk about that, shall I? Okay. So that's the first formal step that a person would do. You're like, you hear Buddhist teachings, you like the idea, you think you might be a nice person trying to kill, lie, steal, and then you decide, okay, I think I like Buddhism, I've checked it up, and now I want to formalise myself and become a Buddhist. So that's where you take refuge. And then either at the same time, formally in front of somebody whom you've decided is one of your teachers, because it's like an important thing to choose the person you do it with, because they represent the Buddha for you. You then also at the same time or later can take the 5 layperson's vows. So they're 2 separate things. Let me talk about them. So first of all, refuge, this formalizing of your decision to, say, follow Buddha's teachings. You're deciding you rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So what the Buddha is, they talk about the absolute Buddha. That just means the pure, unmanifest, all-knowing, all-compassionate consciousness. And billions of beings have become a Buddha. So that mind, that's the actual Buddha. But then the relative Buddha is the human form, like, for example, Shakyamuni Buddha, the human body manifesting, the Buddha's mind manifesting as a human person whom we can see and hear. You understand? Because we can't, communicate with subtle energy. So that's the relative Buddha. And the way to have confidence in the Buddha is by reading the teachings, thinking about it, and thinking, yes, I can have confidence in him or whoever. And then the next one is the Dharma. What's that? Well, that's the teachings that Buddha gives. Well, the actual Dharma, the absolute Dharma, is the knowledge, the wisdom in the mind of a Buddha, the actual knowledge of the Dharma, the real, the experiential knowledge, not just of the Buddha, but of what's called all the superior beings. So you become an Arya being or a superior being from the first second of your non-conceptual insight into emptiness. Like I said before, once you've had that first direct perception, direct realization of emptiness in your subtle meditation, from that second you become a superior being. You're climbing out of samsara into your nirvana. You've got much more work to do, but you can't fall back after that because you've cut the route. So the knowledge, the actual experiential knowledge in the minds of superior beings, including the Buddhas, that's the absolute Dharma. It's like the real music is in Bach's mind. But what good is that? We can't communicate with Bach, so he writes it down in little notations on a piece of paper. That's the relative music. Well, here, the relative Dharma is the words. The words. They talk about the power of speech. The real gift of the Buddha is his speech. The words that express the knowledge in his mind. And there's a lovely term in Tibetan, rigsin, knowledge holder. And that's all anybody. I mean, I remember my mother when she first taught me to make a cake. That was when cakes became real for me. Because she's a valid cake maker. She was a rigsin, a knowledge holder of cakes. And that's what a teacher is. That's why we need a teacher. You can learn recipes in a book, but I heard this recipe for the first time from my mother, and that's when cakes became real for me. That's the function of a teacher. And that's the relative Dharma, the absolute, and the Buddha and the Dharma. So the relative Dharma is the words, which you put into practice. Then you've got the absolute Sangha is those superior beings. But the relative Sangha for the Buddha is anybody living in the fullness of his vows in his Vinaya. That means at least in any one place for the Buddha, where there are 4 fully ordained monks or nuns, that's the criterion for the existence of the livingness of Dharma in that place. So the absolute Sangha are the 4 Arya beings, but that could be the homeless person down the road you can't recognize. So the relative Sangha is represented by the monks and nuns. So that's the 3 jewels they talk about. So one is relying upon them. So you formalize your commitment to, take refuge every day, to try to be kind. There's a few things. You commit to take refuge every day. You commit to be kind to sentient beings. You commit to do a bit of study. You commit to have respect for the images that represent Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, a few little things like that. Then you formalize that and you just say 3 times in front of that person, I take refuge, blah, 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 blah. That's refuge. Then you have the 5 lay vows. And then you only do that once you've taken refuge. And that's really very powerful. So a commitment is a decision to do something, and a vow is a decision to refrain from something. And vows for the Buddha are just kind of mind-blowing. He loves his vows. They talk about all these different sets of vows, the different levels of teachings. So the way they say, the Buddhist teachings say that a vow is like a subtle physical energy that's visible to clairvoyance, like a subtle form. So there are 5, even though there's 10 little list of 10 instructions, vows are only about behavior, not about the mind. So there are 5 of them. And one is you vow never to kill a sentient being, human or any other. You vow never to lie. You vow never to steal or take the ungiven, as they say in Tibetan. And you vow not to cheat on partners, not sexual misconduct. And the 5th one, and people don't always take all of these, but you don't have to. The 5th one is a vow not to take intoxicants. So then and in front of that person, from now until the time of our death, I will never kill, I will never lie. You take that. And the Buddha would say, and this is what Lama Zopa says, which is Buddhist teachings, which is very powerful. He said, you could have one person doing masses of daily practice, lots of spiritual practice, but not living in vows. Even just not having a vow not to kill. Whereas you have one other person merely having a vow not to kill. The potency of vows is so marvelous that the person with just the vow not to kill is creating infinite more virtuous karma and purifying their mind infinitely more because of the power of vows. So the logic of it's like this. Like I said before, when you do an action, like kill the mouse, or no, you do an action called not killing. The main vow is to not kill. Lama Zopa, people say if you want to do one thing to be most powerful, don't kill. At least don't kill. Because it's the heaviest of all the negative actions. It's obvious. It's not to kill. So the point is this. We're sitting here right now, and we're not killing, are we? But there's no intention not to kill, is there? At this moment, we're not thinking, I will not kill, because there's no sentient being that you're trying to refrain from killing, unless you want to kill your boyfriend who's next to you. So it's only when you have the thought, I will not kill, because that's intention. That's only then that you drop the seed into your bank vault of not killing. Can you hear that point? It's only when you have the thought not to kill, because intention means karma. If there's no intention, there's no karma. Like the generosity, you walk past a homeless person, 20 francs falls out of your pocket, but there's no intention, so there's no generosity karma. Well, if there's no killing, but there's no intention not to kill, there's no virtue of not killing. And we need, at the time of our death, we need bucket loads of delicious, intentional, non-killing karmic seeds. Because the bare minimum requirement to even get another human birth is the morality of non-killing. That's the key cause of getting a human body. And we need bucket loads of those delicious, intentional, non-killing karmic seeds in our bank vault. That's the most basic of morality. So the easy way to create that morality is to live in vows of not killing, because this is the point of the vows now, that 24 hours a day that you have a vow not to kill, then 24 hours a day, whether you're thinking about it or not, because of the power of vows, you're ticking over virtuous karmic, you're dropping virtuous karmic seeds every second into your bank vault, and you're putting atomic bombs under your habits of past killing. So you can't get ahead of the game. Being a good person is not enough, Lama Zopa says. We need to have the vows. Vows are so potent. And having them in your mind stream is what makes practice so easy, So as Rinpoche says, for us, the cause of our life that we've got now isn't just being good in the past. We must have practiced the morality of not killing, not stealing, not lying in the past in the context of living in vows of not killing, not lying, not stealing, which is what gives us this human body, and then why we have even now the intention to be sitting in a room like this, as opposed to the gun club, is because we've lived in vows in the past. And so, for example, the 2 examples I gave, I think of those 2 little boys. One little boy crying with compassion for the lice in his own head when his mother's trying to take out the lice. Why that is because he had lived in vows in the past. And the other little boy who saw fishing for the first time fell in love with fishing. He'd been in the lower realms in the past due to killing. He finished that karma, exhausted the main karma, but the tragedy was he hadn't vowed never to kill again. So he gets born in this life, and the residual result of that past killing continues, and he continues to kill, and straight back to the lower realms. That's the tragedy. So living in vows is fundamental, is like the best practice you can have, the easiest one. Okay? So you have to ask somebody to give you the vows and give you refuge. Whom you like and whom you decide, whom you think of as a teacher, and whom you like and whom you'd like to see as one of your teachers, and you'd request them to do it for you. Pardon? Ah, see. Well, I mean, first of all, you could ask me for sure. You can ask anybody, but then they have to decide. You have to know if they're qualified. So Lama Zopa happened to give me permission to do it in our organisation. So, but then I would say yes if you're confident that you are confident that you've checked up and you feel that you would have confidence to take it. Then we could do a little agreement and shake hands, and we could do it. But it could also be we could do it before the class finished. You don't have to wait till the class is over, if you wanted it. Do you understand? If you wanted, yes. So I'm very happy if people want, you want, whoever, we could do at the end of the class, or we could finish if you wanted. But it's important you do choose the person. It's important you feel confident. Because, you can have many teachers, and why it's important is because, the Buddha's not here. So, if I do it, I've given the commission from Lama Zopa to do it, and I got it from my teachers, you got it from their teachers, and you can actually, it's very powerful. You can track it back in an unbroken chain of humans right back to the Buddha. So it's kind of like a person's the Buddha for you, and then it makes it more powerful for you. So if you want, we can certainly do if you want it, if you've thought about it. Okay. What else, people? Yeah. Huge, yes. Intention is I will kill the mouse. Bare bones. You see, the trouble is, I think, with us now, intention and motivation are so packed together we don't see the difference. And because we're programmed, like food, for example. I mean, I'm attached to food, So intention to eat is so linked, so locked with the motivation. You don't even decide separately. Because the motivation is attachment so strong and so habitual that it becomes like one thing. But there's two things there, and that's the miracle. If we can really understand the Bodhisattva path, we simply put in the new motivation. Before you put the food in the mouth, you decide, it's artificial in the beginning, okay, I'm going to eat so I can get healthy. I'm going to eat so I can be kind to sentient beings. Straight away, you put in a new motivation. And even though attachment's still there, you're training your mind to change your motivation. That's what I'm talking about. So intention is bare bones, I will. And then motivation. So in other words, there's no such thing as just simply intention. There's always something that motivates it. And that's what Buddha's saying. We're right now motivated by attachment. So changing our motivation or putting in a new motivation, that's what transforms our actions. Do you see? It's hugely different. And that's the Bodhisattva path that completely can transform. Just by every day, by deciding, what am I eating for? Oh, so I can be beneficial to sentient beings. Straight away, that has a powerful meaning. And that's why Lama Zopa says, do everything with bodhicitta. That's what it means. Remember the kindness of others. Remember to do your eating, your sleeping. Having your sex, do the same. But we feel guilty. Oh, you can't have good motivation for sex. Don't be ridiculous. Of course you can. You just decide, I'm going to be kind and generous. I'm bored tonight, but she wants, okay. You understand? I mean, really, I'm serious. You do it with a pure motivation. Straight away, an action that would normally be just attachment, self-centered, becomes a generous action. It's easy to transform. It's easy by changing our mind. Of course, you don't go around killing with compassion, please, okay? That's kind of, you draw the line there. Don't just say, I can change my motivation for everything. No. Do you get my point? But you've got to be conscious. This is why our question's so good, Sasha. You've got to be conscious to consciously decide to put in there a pure motivation. And then then like anything, you train in it and it becomes habitual. And one day you'll be spontaneously compassionate. It's very powerful, actually. But we tend to think, my motivation's so bad. Well, change it. We tend to be stuck with what's there, And that's why we have to have awareness of what's in our mind. That's the point. That's the whole point of being a Buddhist. You with me, Sasha? Yeah. You with me? Yeah. Okay, what else? What can I read you from Lama to finish to inspire you? Just. You understand? Okay. Yeah, okay, I'll say it again. A vow, the Buddhist view, a vow is a decision to refrain from something. And a commitment, we use these two terms in Buddhism. A commitment is a decision to do something, and a vow is a decision to refrain from something. And this Buddha's view about vows, as I said, is or precept. Maybe say precept. I mean, you know yourself, if you just say have a girlfriend, I don't know if you like girls, you have a girlfriend, and then one day you decide to commit yourself to the girlfriend. There's a big difference, isn't there? You've made a conscious decision, I'm going to live with her, I'm not going to cheat, I'll be nice, and it becomes more powerful when you make the decision. So this one of vowing not to kill, not to lie, not to steal, it programs your mind with these very deep habits. And the Buddha's view is even that they are like subtle physical energy. It's very interesting. Because and because of the vow, this is what Buddhists would say, 24 hours a day you're living in that vow, you're creating virtuous karma even without the intention. That's the power of vows they talk about, you know. It's very interesting. I don't know. I won't read anything. Just finish. We'll just finish, won't we? Nothing to read. No, nothing to read. So then, I mean, we can finish, and then anybody who did decide any more questions about refuge and vows, that if you people want to thinking about it. I'm not saying you have to, but seeing as you brought it up. What, darling? You go on, talk about it. We'll finish with that.
So I did refuge already, but I just took 3 vows.
Yes, so then?
Is that okay?
What do you mean, is that okay? You're the boss.
No, because...
Darling, I said, shush. I said before, with these lay vows, there are 5 lay vows. You choose which ones you wish to take. There are certain sets of vows you either take them or you don't. But these ones you decide. You decide, yes. That's your choice. Well, according to whom? Well, that's right. You always worry about what people think. We all like saying that. It's okay. There's no one bossing you around. You're the boss. What else then? About refuge and vows. Do you have any questions, seeing as you're the one who asked? Yes. Okay, good. So ask questions. It's important. No, I didn't ask you. No, I'm not asking. No. Sure. No, please be careful. I'm not asking you if you think I'm a teacher. I'm saying to you that if you do take refuge with a person, they need to be a person that you think of as a teacher. It's not my business. I'm not saying you should. I'm saying if you did take refuge from someone, you should make that decision that that person is a person that you're happy to see as a teacher. That's the onus is on you, not on me. Oh, you've taken refuge already. Oh, okay. Good. The vows. Okay. So what, darling? That's your business. But I think it's important you talk about the vows first, because sometimes we have a bit of a misconception without being personal which vows. But why don't you talk about the different, what you think of that? Why would you think you'd only want to take 2? Just talk about vows in general.
Yes, I don't think I would trust myself into 3 of them.
Okay, I think then... No, really? You're that bad? Oh, okay. So, now let me. Okay, good. Now let me say something. Okay, let me just say some things, and you listen to this and think about it. Okay. It's a bit like, oh, how can I take a vow to lie? Because I might have to lie tomorrow. Whereas the point is, if you take a vow not to lie, that energizes you and reminds you to watch your speech like a hawk. So vows are, in other words, put another way, really simple. It's a bit like saying, oh, I don't want to drive a car just in case I forget to not go too fast. Basically, when you drive a car, if you started to list all the commitments and vows that you have taken, you'd have 100. I must not put the foot on the brake at the same time as accelerator. I must not go in the left lane if a car's coming. I must not reverse if this is happening. You've got a whole series of instructions to drive a car, haven't you? They're called vows and commitments. And you would never say, oh, I won't drive a car in case I crash. I won't drive a car in case I go too fast. I won't drive a car in case I forget how to park. You decide you're going to park. You decide you're going to drive well, and that makes you drive the car. Occasionally you might make a mistake. So it's a bit passive to say, I might. Do you see my point? The very point, no, listen carefully. I'm not forcing you to take anything, but really try to understand the point of a vow isn't to restrict you, isn't to suffocate you, isn't to make you feel afraid, isn't to make you get naughty girl and be punished. It's a guideline to give you courage to practice morality. It's the very thing it's the very thing that'll help you learn to drive better. If you don't know the vows of how to drive a car, you won't know how to drive a car. And you won't even know if you've broken the vows. So don't hear it in a moralistic way. They're like instructions for how to help you learn to control your body and speech so that you can practice morality. So it's like it should be a delight to live in a vow. And the very reason you take a vow is because if you never lied, you never need to take a vow. I'm just giving you a discussion to think about. And it's your private business what you do. You shouldn't even tell anybody. No, you're putting seeds in your vault 24 hours a day, even when you're not killing, with a vow. With a vow. Absolutely. When you don't have a vow not to kill, it's only when you think of not killing that you pop a seed in your bank vault. But it's a very weak seed because our virtue, which is the main thing that characterizes it as a good action, is usually not so strong. Whereas if you have a vow not to kill, 24 hours a day, you are putting seeds in your bank vault and you're purifying your mind. You break a vow. But that's like saying, if I never drive a car, I will never have an accident. Isn't it? But if you do drive a car, look at the advantages of driving a car, and you might have an accident. You might go too fast. You might get a speeding ticket. But if you have the benefits of driving a car, you're prepared to risk the things going wrong. And we never think of it like that. And whereas we hear vows because we're so used to the religious, moralistic, fearful thing, we're scared, Don't hear it like that. Do you hear my point? I'm just giving a view, that's all, how to think about it. It's a guideline. And remembering the power of it. Because, the point is to break a vow, you've got to strongly intend to do the action. You've got to know you're breaking a vow. You've got to not care and have no interest in purifying it. And that would not be. When a person takes a vow, they're very serious. So it's really powerful to break a vow. Do you understand? So it's it's unusual. Some people, some people take the vow not to have alcohol, then they take alcohol again. That happens. But usually, unless you're an addicted killer, it's unusual for a person to kill. We all tend to lie a bit. That's why having a vow is like a guideline for you. It's an instruction. When you know that you shouldn't go more than 70 kilometres an hour, that guides you to make sure you have your eye on the clock. But if you didn't know you shouldn't go 70, you'd be breaking the law all the time. A vow is a benefit. I'm not trying to force you, but I'm trying to get you to hear about what I'm saying. Do you understand the benefit of it? Are we with me, people? And I think as soon as we do decide something, it makes much more power for us. It's like it's there guiding us, It's very interesting. What else? For you, because you're the one talking about it. Anybody else? Nobody, okay. You don't, okay. I said them before, but I'll say them again. You vow not to kill. You break vow in a major way if you kill a human being. And that means intentional, knowing you've got a vow, not caring, and having no interest in changing it. And that's kind of unusual. But then, so you break it in a major way if you kill a human, and then you break it at the root and you have to take it again from somebody. Break in a minor way if you kill ants and other creatures. So there's that. Second, no taking the ungiven, as the Tibetans call it. It's very sweet. That means you break in a major way if you take something of value to someone else. And you break in a minor way if you take anything that hasn't been given to you. And that's an interesting one, because, look at computers these days. You just press a button, you get a movie, it's effortless. So it really helps us it really gives us like guidelines to really watch our behavior, it's interesting. The third is no lying, and so you break in a major way if you lie about your spiritual attainments. and you break in a minor way if you say anything that isn't true. And this is a point about vows. Like learning the road rules, they give you the guidance of how to do it. They're like the instructions of what to do. In that sense, they're very powerful, not rather than fearful of breaking. They're giving you guidelines. And then when you realise the benefit that in your mind 24 hours a day is incredible. And also by living in vows, you're purifying those habits. So it makes it easier not to lie, kill and steal by keeping your vows. And then when you do the 4 opponent powers at the end of the day, you purify the weakened vows. And then you reiterate at the end of every day, I will never kill, I will never steal, I will never lie. And like you're digging the groove deeper in your mind every day, so it becomes a deeper habit. That's the way it is. Yes, you're practicing not killing. You're practicing not lying. You're practicing not stealing. The next one is no sexual misconduct. That usually is interpreted, well, not raping, for example, misusing your body to harm others based on sexual attachment, but also not cheating on partners, usually, if you have a partner, And the fifth one is no intoxicants, which usually means alcohol or heroin or something, right, or whatever. So if you want your shot every day of heroin, you don't take that vow. They're the 5 vows. What else, people? Yes. The vow, the way I give it, which is how I was taught it, is to not take. But His Holiness the Dalai Lama, out of great kindness to, deluded people like you and me, has given the vow. He gives the vow as not getting drunk. But that's not the way I give it. I just give it this way because that's how I learned it. It's up to individuals. You understand? Yeah. Dalai Lama, so kindly. And even too, when he gives refuge and vows to a great big group of people, Westerners, he always gives the killing one as no killing only humans, because he knows that most Westerners find it very hard not to kill roaches and rats and things. So he's so kind in narrowing down the vow just to don't kill humans. And so by the fact of living, not killing, most of us won't kill a human. So it's marvellous to have the vow because it's the power of the vow itself, purifying your mind so that next life you wake up with no thought to kill. That's the power of having vows,
And for the killing, because I didn't take that, because I wouldn't know if I eat meat or not.
And nothing to do with killing.
Okay.
Well, you don't just say, okay, you should analyse it.
No, but it's new to me.
Well, you don't just accept it. You should ask why. Thank you. You just believe what I said. It's really laziness. Listen, okay. To do an action, there needs to be the object there. To have an action of killing, there has to be an object there, a living being. Second, there is your mind involved in it, and that is there has to be the intention to kill and the motivation of attachment or aversion or whatever. Third, you do the action. Fourth, the sentient being is dead. That's a complete action of killing in general. So then in general also, any action we do, like, let's say there's, that's in general an action of killing. So when you eat a carrot, it's not a sentient being. But don't you, that many sentient beings died in the growing and the picking of that carrot, don't you? But we don't think about that. So then you could say, well, I must be killing sentient beings because when I get a carrot, many beings died. Well, they did. But just by breathing, you're killing sentient beings. By walking, by driving, we're killing billions of beings. By using products that are using animals' bodies. So whatever we do, so eating has really got nothing to do with it. It's just that we're so obsessed about eating, we think that's the only thing. That's why I always, because we're so attached to eating, we think if you eat meat, somehow that's the worst thing. But we eat vegetarian, creatures die. I remember one scientist in Victoria, I read about how I told you this wheat field. And then they grow wheat. What for? Well, 20% for the bulls, for the meat eaters, or whatever we eat, and 80% for the holy vegans. And in the off season, when there's no wheat there, these millions of little cute field mice live there. And when they have to grow the wheat, what do? They kill the millions of mice. But the fundamentalist vegans and vegetarians say, oh, you can't help that, because as soon as we eat it, that's when we have a problem. But it's insane. The holy vegans and vegetarians, millions of mice died for their wheat, but they don't care because they don't eat it. So I think it's a bit extreme when we think of only eating being the problem. Are you getting my point here? Just whatever we do, we're slaughtering creatures. Driving a car. Some guy did the research. It's billions, trillions of little sentient beings just on the number plate get slaughtered. So whatever we do, that's why we have to have awareness and have consciousness, have compassion. Or be like Lama Zopa, he puts mantras all over his cars so the sentient beings that bash into the cars get the blessing of the mantra. So we've got to be aware of this. So just whether you eat meat's kind of irrelevant. But of course, to do any action that does involve the harming of sentient beings, you attempt not to do it. You understand? Well, it's something as not just the fishing, like I'm saying. I mean, so many things that happen. And yeah, so you understand. But killing is the most important one. And try to remember the point of vows, like I'm saying here, isn't to restrict us from doing something, isn't to make us naughty. And that's how we think about it. It's to put in your mind stream the powerful habit of morality and non-harming such that you develop that, and it purifies your past habits, and it causes you waking up next life in a human body with no thought to kill. If you look at the human planet, most humans kill something because they haven't vowed not to kill. So you just wake up with a habit. And most religions even say it's okay to kill. So the killing is the most marvelous vow to have. Do you understand? When you see the benefit of it, don't see the restriction of it. Oh, I might be naughty and I might do it. Better not to do it. That's like I said. That's like saying I'll never drive a car in case I get a parking ticket. I mean, it's ridiculous. You've got to see the advantages of driving a car, and you're prepared to risk getting a ticket, but you use your common sense. So see the advantages of living in vows. That's one of the key points in Buddhism. He says vows are the most powerful way. You can't. Lama Zopa is saying we can't really get ahead without living morality in the context of vows, because they're so powerful in our mind stream, 24 hours a day, and they purify our mind. In other words, you're programming your mind in morality easily, without effort, you know. The only reason I'm a nun, because I appreciate the power of vows. Why would I want to listen to these 14th century robes for, you know? So I think it's time to finish. We'll do the refuge and go. The people who want to go can go. Yes, darling.
Yes, if you're taking a refuge, it's always connected to taking vows.
No, refuge usually comes first, and then you can vows often. If I were to do it here, I would do the both. But people can decide if you take refuge only, and you can take the vows as well if you want. But you wouldn't take the you can't take the vows if you haven't taken refuge. Yeah. Yes. You can renew your vows and you renew your refuge. Absolutely, you can do that. It's very helpful to do that. Some people say you don't need to, but I think it's great. It helps, especially if we've weakened our vows. We're a bit lazy sometimes. Huh? You don't say words that are wrong. That's it. You don't say words that are not true.
For example, if I feel something, but I say something different, like how are you?
Yeah.
I'm well.
That's not lying. That's being kind to sentient beings. No, you see, lying doesn't mean saying everything that's true, like you've got indigestion or you're smelly or something, or oh, you're looking ugly today. Or no, people says, you like my dress? Yes, it's a lovely dress. Oh, I'm lying. Understand the point of a lie is it's coming from self-centeredness and usually protecting ourselves. But being kind to somebody, saying you're fine. Do you understand that? That's not a lie. How can you say that's a lie? Do you understand? Really get the meaning of a lie. You know, it's always self-centered. It's always, for your own benefit and to protect you as opposed to someone else somehow, isn't it? I think so. What else, people? Those who want to do the refuge and vows, be clear. If there are any more questions, it's important and then we can finish and do that if you want. Or we can finish then. So we just think, we've been together a couple of days, all these thoughts we've had. And this is the one about karma. As many moments as there have been is as many seeds each one of us has planted in our mind. So be blissed out. Even this much, all this information gone in, none of it will go astray. Every thought we've had, everything we've done, it's gone in the mind. So how marvelous. So we think maybe nourish these seeds with our effort, our practice, whether we call ourselves Mickey Mouseist, Tonyist, or Buddhist, it doesn't matter. Do work with what you do, practice your path, practice morality, work on your body, work on your speech, work on your mind, for your sake and the sake of sentient beings. How amazing. Be so delighted, So we rejoice in that for ourselves and each other. I can't sing today. That'll do. And may compassion grow and grow in the hearts of all. That's it. Finished. Thank you so much. You should just do it. Yeah, come on. You should have offered it first as a request. You wait till the end. You should have done it at the beginning. Why not? We forgot.
No.
Oh, that's the wrong reason. That's completely wrong reason. Do it. Come on, get on with it. They're going to offer what's called a mandala. It looks like a 10-pin bowling. It's meant to represent the universe. It is, it's true. It's meant to represent the universe. Who would know? You wouldn't know that, would you? There's Mount Meru and the 4 continents and a couple of others here. I don't know what they are. So come on. Where's your cutters? Where's your cutters? Quickly. Go on then. Oh, I see. Okay, quick. Get on with it.